Last time, Team 7 walked off the Great Naruto Bridge with a name carved into a signpost in Naruto's honor, a fallen swordsman and his apprentice laid to rest beneath cherry blossoms, and a nomination form in Kakashi's hand that read 3 words guaranteed to change everything: Chunin exams. Konoha, if you've been with this story since Chapter 1, you already know Naruto's not walking into that exam the same boy who once couldn't land a transformation jutsu to save his life. He's got Fang Style in his fists, a wolf pup on call, and senses sharp enough to smell a killer's intent before a kunai's even left its holster. But here's the thing about the Chunin exams: they don't care how far you've come. They only care whether you're ready for what's about to hit you. Let's find out if he is. The 2 weeks leading up to the exam were, without exaggeration, the hardest 2 weeks of Naruto's entire life. And considering everything he'd already survived, that's saying something. Every spare hour not spent on team drills with Kakashi went straight into the wolf den, where Ash Cloud had apparently decided that hard wasn't a strong enough word for what Naruto needed and had settled, instead, on borderline unbearable. Again, she said, for what had to be the 200th time that week, watching Naruto drag himself up out of the snow yet again, for shadow clones dissolving in quick succession around him like dominoes. I've been doing it again. Naruto snapped back, chest heaving, sweat freezing at his temples despite the cold. What am I even doing wrong? You're still fighting like one wolf pretending to be 4, Ash Cloud said, unbothered by his frustration in the way only someone who delivered this exact lecture a dozen times before could manage, not 4 wolves who happened to share one mind. There's a difference, Stray, and until you feel it, you're going to keep eating dirt. Silverfang, watching from his usual perch atop the outcropping, said nothing, which, if you'd spent as much time around the old wolf as Naruto had by now, was somehow more unsettling than criticism. Silverfang only went quiet like that when he was waiting for something. And Naruto had learned, the hard way, that whatever Silverfang was waiting for usually mattered. It took another 6 failed attempts, 6 more face plants, 6 more bruised elbows, 6 more mouthfuls of snow, before something finally clicked. Naruto stopped trying to consciously direct his clones through the flanking pattern Ash Cloud had drilled into him, and instead let his attention soften, spreading outward the way it did when he was tracking scent trails blindfolded, feeling for the shape of the fight rather than watching it unfold piece by piece. The 4 clones moved as one fluid unit for the first time, circling, hurting, striking in a staggered rhythm that gave Ash Cloud, fast as she was, genuine trouble finding an opening. She broke off the spar, sitting back on her haunches, gold eyes narrowed with something that might, on a more sentimental creature, have looked suspiciously like pride. There it is, she said simply. Naruto collapsed flat on his back in the snow, grinning up at the permanent dusk-purple sky, utterly spent. Does that mean I'm ready? It means you're less embarrassing than you were a week ago, Ash Cloud said. Then, after a pause, quieter, it means you're ready to start being ready. Which, for a stray who couldn't hold a transformation jutsu 2 months ago, isn't nothing. From above, Silverfang finally spoke. The exam ahead will not test strength alone, he said, descending from his perch with the slow, deliberate weight that always seemed to still the air around him. It will test judgment, restraint, the willingness to trust those around you even when trust has never once come easily to you. His ice blue eyes settled on Naruto with unusual intensity. There will be a moment in that arena, I do not know precisely which one, where the easiest path and the right path diverge. Remember what this den has taught you when that moment comes. Yeah, pack before self, Naruto said, waving a tired hand as he pushed himself upright. I got it. Do you? Silverfang's voice carried a weight that made Naruto pause. Understanding a lesson and living it in the moment it matters most are very different things, Stray. I have watched centuries of wolves learn that distinction the hard way. I would prefer you did not have to. Naruto opened his mouth to brush it off with another easy joke, and then, looking at the genuine concern buried in that ancient, weathered face, thought better of it. I'll remember, he said instead, quieter than usual. Promise. Silverfang studied him a moment longer, then inclined his head, satisfied, at least for tonight. The morning of the first exam arrived cold and gray, Konoha's streets thick with genin teams from villages Naruto had never even heard of, all of them wearing the same nervous, keyed-up energy he could practically taste in the air. You ready for this? Sakura asked, falling into step beside him as they approached the academy building where the exam would be held. Course I am, Naruto said, flashing his usual grin, though underneath it, faint enough that only someone paying close attention would catch it, was a thread of genuine nerves he wasn't quite ready to admit out loud. Sasuke, walking a step ahead, said nothing, but the tight set of his shoulders told its own story. The exam room, when they finally pushed through its doors, hit Naruto with an overwhelming wall of killing intent and raw tension so dense it was almost physically staggering. Dozens of genin teams from villages across the elemental nations, all radiating hostility and nerves in equal measure. Naruto's nose wrinkled instinctively, sorting through the tangle of unfamiliar scents without quite meaning to, cataloging threat levels the way Ash Cloud had drilled into him. That team by the window, nervous, but not dangerous. That one in the corner, controlled, disciplined, dangerous. And whoever's radiating that much killing intent from the back corner. His eyes found the source before his mind fully processed the warning his senses were already screaming. A pale, red-haired boy standing utterly still near the back wall, a massive gourd strapped to his back, eyes ringed with dark shadows that made him look like he hadn't slept in years. Two teammates flanked him, both radiating a strange, careful wariness that had nothing to do with the exam and everything to do with the boy between them. Naruto's skin prickled. That scent, cold, and beneath it something raw and grinding, like sand scouring stone, didn't feel like nervous killing intent dressed up for intimidation. It felt like something that had killed before. Recently. Without hesitation. That's not a threat display, he thought, an unfamiliar chill settling into his chest. That's just what he is. He didn't get long to sit with the thought before a scuffle broke out across the room. Kiba, predictably, running his mouth at a genin from another village who took exception to it fast enough that a fight nearly broke out before a stern-faced, heavily bandaged proctor stepped in and shut the whole exam room down cold with nothing but a look. My name is Ibiki Marino, the man said, voice carrying an authority that needed no volume to enforce it. I'll be your proctor for the first exam. Sit down, shut up, and listen carefully, because the rules I'm about to explain are the only thing standing between you and disqualification. What followed was, as this story's viewers already know well, less a written exam than an elaborate psychological trap. 10 questions, most of them deliberately, impossibly difficult, designed not to test knowledge but to test whether genin were willing to cheat under pressure, and whether they were skilled enough not to get caught doing it. Naruto, staring down at a question about calculating trajectory variables he had absolutely no hope of solving through legitimate means, felt his old, familiar panic start to creep in, the same panic that had failed him through 3 separate academy graduation attempts. Sent before sight, he reminded himself, forcing a slow breath. Instinct before instruction. He couldn't smell his way to a math answer. But he could, he realized, feel the shape of the room around him the way he'd learned to feel Ash Cloud's positioning during blindfolded drills, the tension radiating off desperate genin scribbling frantically, the calm, controlled breathing of the ones who'd clearly already found ways to cheat successfully, the careful, deliberate stillness of those choosing to simply guess and hope. He didn't cheat. He genuinely couldn't figure out how, honestly, and some stubborn part of him wouldn't have wanted to even if he could. He answered what he could, guessed at the rest, and settled in to wait out the clock with the same restless, twitchy energy he brought to everything, watching, really watching, the way Silverfang had taught him, the proctors circling the room, picking off genin teams one by one for disqualification. By the time Ibiki finally delivered the infamous 10th question, the one, as most people following this story already know, that was never really about the answer at all, but about whether genin were willing to risk everything on the choice to keep going. Naruto's hand shot into the air before Sakura could stop him, before he even fully processed what he was about to say. I don't care what happens, he declared, loud enough that the entire room turned to look at him. I'm not gonna run away, not from this test, not from anything. Even if I end up a genin forever, I'll become Hokage as a genin, and nobody's gonna stop me from trying. The words hung in the air, and for one long, breathless moment, Naruto genuinely thought he might have just cost his entire team their shot at the exam. Instead, Ibiki's scarred face cracked into something that might, on a kinder man, have been called a smile. Congratulations, he said. You all pass. The relief that swept through the room was immediate, and overwhelming, but Naruto barely registered any of it. He was still staring at Ibiki, replaying his own outburst in his head, wondering, not for the first time this exam, whether the instincts this last month had sharpened in him went deeper than scent and sound. A wolf who fights as though the pack still surrounds them, Silverfang's voice echoed in his memory. Maybe that applied to more than just fighting. The second exam, the infamous Forest of Death, deserves its own telling someday. And honestly, dear viewer, if enough of you leave comments asking for it, I might just come back and give you the full 5-day survival story in all its brutal detail. For now, let's hit the highlights, because there's a lot of ground still ahead of us tonight. Team 7 entered the fenced, towering expanse of the forest with an earth scroll in hand, tasked with securing its heaven scroll counterpart from a rival team before the 5-day clock ran out. And if Naruto's month of tracking drills had proven useful during the wave mission, it proved absolutely indispensable here. Within the first 6 hours, he'd already identified 3 separate teams moving through the surrounding brush purely by scent, steering his own team clear of 2 genuinely dangerous encounters before they ever became fights at all. How do you keep doing that? Sakura asked, more than a little amazed, after Naruto quietly redirected them around a team of rain genin whose chakra signatures, he insisted, smelled wrong. Trade secret, Naruto said, grinning, though he was starting to feel less like he was hiding something from his team and more like he simply hadn't found the right moment yet to explain it properly. The scroll exchange, when it finally came, arrived through a tense, 3-way skirmish against a team from Rain that ended, thanks in no small part to Frostpaw's speed and a coordinated Fang Style ambush that, even Sasuke grudgingly admitted was not bad, with Team 7 walking away bruised but victorious, both scrolls secured well ahead of schedule. The forest, however, wasn't done with them yet. It was on the 3rd day, deep in a stretch of forest thick with unnatural stillness, that Naruto's senses screamed a warning unlike anything he'd felt since Zabuza's ambush on the road to Wave, a killing intent so vast, so ancient and predatory, that for one horrifying moment he actually froze in place, every instinct in his body recognizing, on some deep and primal level, that whatever was approaching outclassed him completely. Orochimaru emerged from the trees wearing a stolen hidden grass headband and a smile that made Naruto's skin crawl worse than anything Zabuza had managed. My, the Sannin said, golden eyes sweeping over the 3 genin with unhurried, predatory interest before settling, to Naruto's considerable surprise, not on Sasuke, as history would suggest, but on him. What an interesting scent you carry, little Uzumaki. Old. Feral. Not toad, not snake. Something I haven't encountered in quite some time. Stay away from my team, Naruto said, forcing steel into his voice despite every instinct telling him to run, positioning himself instinctively between Orochimaru and his teammates. Orochimaru's smile widened, delighted rather than deterred. How protective. How pack-like. He tilted his head, studying Naruto with unsettling intensity. Tell me, boy, did you know the wolves and the toads share a rather bloody history? I wonder if the old sage toads have told you that story yet, or if they've been keeping it quiet, the way old creatures so often do with their ugliest secrets. Naruto's stomach twisted, memory flickering back to Kakashi's own vague, uneasy warning back in the land of waves. Old stories about a rival clan to the toads. Circumstances nobody in my generation ever got a straight answer about. I don't know what you're talking about, Naruto said, and I don't care. Come near my team and You'll what? Orochimaru's amusement sharpened into something colder. No, little wolf. Not today. Today, I have other business. His attention shifted, at last, towards Sasuke, and what followed unfolded largely as this story's viewers already know, a brutal, one-sided assault that ended with Orochimaru delivering the curse mark to Sasuke's neck despite Naruto and Sakura's desperate efforts to intervene. Naruto fought with everything he had, Fang Style and Frostpaw and every ounce of speed his month of training had given him, and it still wasn't remotely enough. Orochimaru toyed with him for exactly as long as it amused him to before withdrawing, satisfied, into the trees, leaving Sasuke unconscious and marked, and Naruto shaking with a helpless, furious frustration he hadn't felt this intensely since the night Mizuki nearly killed Irika. Even with everything I've learned, he thought bitterly, cradling Sasuke's unconscious weight against him as Sakura fought back tears beside him, it wasn't enough. He didn't know it yet, but that failure, raw and humiliating as it felt in the moment, was about to become the exact fuel that carried him through everything still ahead. Team 7 survived the remainder of the forest exam, delivered their scrolls with barely an hour to spare, and gathered, along with every other surviving team, in the massive central arena beneath the Forest of Death's tower, where the third Hokage himself addressed the assembled genin about the true meaning behind the Chunin exams, not merely a test of skill, but a demonstration of each village's strength to the nations gathered to watch. Too many teams had passed, it turned out, for the finals to proceed directly, which meant preliminary matches, right there in the tower, genin fighting genin in single, sudden death eliminations to thin the field before the real exam even began. Naruto watched the first several matches unfold with the same tight, restless energy as everyone else, a fierce, closely matched bout between two sound genin that ended in a brutal, decisive finish. Sakura's own hard-fought, emotionally raw victory against Ino that surprised absolutely everyone in the arena, herself included. Shikamaru's lazy, brilliant tactical win that had Naruto shaking his head in reluctant admiration. And then the board flickered, cycled through its randomized names, and settled. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kiba Inuzuka. Ha! Finally! Kiba's grin was fierce and confident as he vaulted down into the arena floor, Akamaru yipping excitedly from atop his head. This is gonna be easy, Naruto. Me and Akamaru have been training way harder than you could keep up with. Naruto dropped down to face him, rolling his shoulders, feeling something settle into place in his chest. Not nervousness, exactly, but a kind of focused, electric anticipation. Of everyone in this tournament, Kiba was, in a strange way, the opponent that mattered most to him. Not because Kiba was the strongest genin here. He wasn't, not by a long shot, but because Kiba's entire fighting philosophy, bonded so tightly to a single loyal partner, mirrored the pack instincts Naruto had spent the last month and a half painstakingly building inside himself. This is basically a test, he realized, an odd, eager grin spreading across his face. Pack versus pack. Bring it on, he said. The proctor's hand dropped. Begin. Kiba didn't waste a second, launching immediately into an aggressive opening, man-beast clone transforming Akamaru into a mirror image of Kiba himself, the two of them coordinating with the easy, practiced synchronicity of partners who'd fought together their entire lives, closing the distance with the brutal, spinning fury of Kiba's signature Fang over Fang technique. Naruto scattered a trio of shadow clones the instant the attack came, not to block it head-on, but to disrupt its trajectory. A lesson learned the hard way, over and over, in ash-clad snow-covered training clearing. Don't meet force with force. Redirect it. Heard it. The spinning twin assault tore through two of his clones in quick succession, but the third caught Kiba's transformed partner at an angle he clearly hadn't anticipated, throwing off the coordination between him and Akamaru just enough to force both of them to break formation and reset. Not bad, Kiba admitted, breathing a little harder, genuine surprise flickering across his sharp features. But you're still gonna have to do better than dodging, Naruto. Who said I was just dodging? Naruto's clone, the one that had absorbed the deflected strike, dissolved in a puff of smoke, and in that instant, the real Naruto, who'd used the distraction to circle wide during the exchange, closed the distance from an angle Kiba hadn't accounted for, claw-shaped Fang Style strike already in motion. Kiba twisted, barely deflecting the blow, genuine shock replacing his earlier confidence. Wait, you're using Fang Style, Naruto confirmed, grinning fiercely. Figured it'd only be fair, considering you and Akamaru basically invented the whole Fang thing first. What followed was, by every account of everyone watching that day, one of the most genuinely entertaining matches of the entire preliminary round, not because either fighter possessed some overwhelming, exam-ending technique, but because it was, in its purest form, a clash of two fighters built around the exact same core philosophy, coordinated, pack-based combat, refusing to fight as isolated individuals. Kiba and Akamaru fought as an inseparable, lifelong bonded pair, moving with an instinctive synchronicity that years of partnership had honed to near perfection. Naruto fought with his shadow clones as an imperfect, still developing echo of that same bond, each exchange forcing him to lean harder into everything Ash Cloud had drilled into him. Anticipate, don't react. Herd, don't chase. Trust the formation, not just your own two fists. You're not fighting like the loudmouth I remember from the academy, Kiba said, circling warily, both he and Naruto breathing hard now, sweat and dirt streaking both their faces. What happened to you? Guess I found my own pack, Naruto said. Kinda like you and Akamaru, actually. Just a little bigger. Something in that answer, simple, honest, delivered without a trace of Naruto's usual boastfulness, seemed to land with Kiba in a way that surprised them both, a flicker of genuine respect crossing his sharp, feral features. Then let's see whose pack's actually stronger, he said, and lunged. The final exchange came fast and decisive. Kiba and Akamaru committed to one last, all-out Fang over Fang assault, betting everything on raw speed and coordinated ferocity to end the match outright, and Naruto, drawing on every ounce of instinct this last month and a half had carved into him, didn't dodge and didn't retreat. He met it. 3 shadow clones, positioned exactly where Ash Cloud's endless drills had taught him a genuine pack would position itself, not clustered together for a single desperate block, but spread wide in a loose, flanking herd, absorbed and redirected the brunt of Kiba's spinning assault, each clone popping in rapid succession as it bought a fraction of a second, until the real Naruto, timing it with a precision that even surprised himself, caught the tail end of Kiba's momentum, and used it against him. A clawed Fang Style strike sweeping Kiba's legs out from under him mid-spin and sending him sprawling hard to the arena floor. Akamaru, exhausted from the extended technique, transformed back and collapsed, whimpering, beside his equally exhausted partner. Kiba lay there for a long moment, staring up at the ceiling, chest heaving, and then, unexpectedly, he started laughing. Well, he said, wincing as he tried and failed to push himself upright, guess your pack's a little bigger after all. The proctor called the match. Naruto had won. He didn't get long to celebrate before something strange happened, a low, resonant hum building in his chest, distinct from the exhausted satisfaction of victory, distinct from anything he recognized from his month of training in the wolf den. He staggered slightly as the sensation crested, and for one disorienting moment, the arena around him seemed to blur, replaced by the faint, ghostly image of a vast, snow-covered valley. Dozens of wolves lifting their heads in unison towards some invisible signal. Well earned, stray, Silverfang's voice echoed, distant but unmistakable, carrying a warmth Naruto had rarely heard from the ancient wolf. That was a true pack victory. You have earned something tonight. The sensation faded as quickly as it came, and Naruto blinked, finding himself back in the arena, Sakura already rushing down to check on him. Several curious eyes lingering on him a beat longer than the match alone would explain. Earned something, he repeated silently, an eager grin spreading across his face despite his exhaustion. He couldn't wait to get back to the den and find out exactly what that meant. The remaining preliminary matches unfolded quickly after that. Shino's quiet, methodical victory, Hinata's brutal, heartbreaking defeat against her own cousin Neji that left the entire arena tense with barely restrained fury on Naruto's part. And finally, in the arena's final match, Sasuke recovered just enough to fight, the curse mark's dark influence flickering visibly across his skin, securing a hard-won, unsettling victory against Yoroi that left Kakashi's expression carefully, deliberately neutral. By the end of it, the finalists were set, a full month granted for training before the true exam would begin, and as the assembled genin filed out of the tower, Naruto felt a firm, unfamiliar hand clap down on his shoulder. He turned to find a tall, white-haired man grinning down at him with an easy, roguish confidence, a massive scroll strapped to his back, a peculiar red marking beneath each eye that somehow made his expression look perpetually amused. "You're Naruto, huh?" the man said, studying him with sharp, calculating interest that didn't entirely match his casual tone. "Heard some interesting things about you. Fought like a whole different kid out there." Do I know you?" Naruto asked warily. "Name's Jiraiya," the man said. "Sannin. Toad Sage. And as it happens, your grandfather's old teachers. Well, it's complicated. Point is, kid, I knew your father, and I've got a personal stake in making sure you come out of this exam a whole lot stronger than you walked in." Naruto's breath caught. "You knew my dad?" Something flickered across Jiraiya's expression, warmth, and beneath it, a carefully guarded weight he clearly wasn't ready to unpack yet. "Later," he said. "For now, I hear the Third's got some concerns about that curse mark your teammate's carrying, which means I'll be sticking around Konoha a bit longer than planned." and since I'm here anyway. He crouched down slightly, dropping his voice, expression sharpening into something considerably more serious. I felt something during your match today, kid. Chakra I haven't sensed in this village in longer than you've been alive. Old. Cold. Feral. His eyes narrowed. You want to tell me exactly whose contract you've been carrying around, or should I guess? Naruto hesitated, some old instinct telling him this was, once again, a moment worth being honest about. Wolves, he admitted. There's this whole hidden den, and this ancient wolf named Silverfang, and Jiraiya went very still. Silverfang, he repeated, voice carefully flat, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. That old gray devil's still alive? You know him? Jiraiya let out a long, slow breath, straightening up, running a hand through his spiky white hair with the weary air of a man confronting a piece of history he genuinely hoped had stayed buried. Kid, he said, how much do you actually know about why the Wolf clan disappeared in the first place? Nothing, really, Naruto admitted. Silverfang mentioned some old war. Some betrayal. He said it was between the wolves and the toads, but he never really explained the details. Jiraiya was quiet for a long moment, gazing off toward the horizon with an expression Naruto had never seen on him before. Something heavy, something that looked almost like guilt, carried by a man far older, and far more burdened than his easy, roguish grin usually let on. That's because the details aren't exactly flattering to my side of the story, he said finally. There's a reason the Toad elders never speak of it. A reason my own master never once mentioned it to me until I was old enough to understand exactly how badly he, wronged that clan. He shook his head slowly. This isn't a conversation for a training ground, kid. But you deserve to hear it, especially now that you're carrying that bond yourself. Old wounds like that one don't stay buried forever, not when the two clans they belong to are suddenly standing this close together again. Naruto's stomach tightened, an uneasy chill settling over him despite the warm afternoon sun. Is that bad? He asked quietly, echoing, almost word for word, the same question he'd once posed to Kakashi in the quiet dark outside Tazuna's house. Jiraiya's expression, for once, held none of his usual easy humor. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I intend to find out, and considering I'll be the one training you for the rest of this exam, kid, I suggest you brace yourself. Because whatever's between our two clans, it's about to become very personal for both of us. That night, back in the wolf den's cold, familiar embrace, Naruto found Silverfang waiting atop his outcropping, and for the first time since Naruto had known him, the ancient wolf's blue eyes carried something that looked almost like apprehension. You spoke to the Toad Sage, Silverfang said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Naruto said, settling into the snow. He knows you. He got really quiet when I said your name, and he said there's stuff about the war between your clans that even his own teacher barely explained to him. He hesitated. Silverfang, what actually happened? Between the wolves and the toads? Silverfang was quiet for a long moment, the wind stirring softly through the valley below, dozens of distant wolves settling in to rest across the snow-covered peaks. That, he said finally, is a story 3 generations old, Stray, and not one I intended to burden you with quite this soon. But if the Toad Sage himself is finally willing to speak of it, he exhaled, low and rumbling, something ancient and tired settling into his powerful frame. Then perhaps it is time you heard the whole of it. Sit. This will take some telling. Ash Cloud, settling in nearby with none of her usual sarcasm, watched Naruto with an expression that, for once, held nothing but quiet, sober attention. You earned your name tonight, Silverfang added, almost as an afterthought, though the weight in his voice made clear it was anything but. That, too, is part of this story, though you will not understand why until you've heard the rest. Before I tell you what happened between our clans, Stray, you should know what the pack has decided to call you. Naruto's heart caught in his throat, the earlier tension momentarily forgotten. What is it? Silverfang's ice blue eyes met his, steady and ancient, and for the first time, unmistakably warm. Emberfang. The name settled over Naruto like something physical, something that fit into a space inside him he hadn't fully realized was still empty. Emberfang, he repeated quietly, testing the weight of it. A stray who fights with a pack's heart even when the pack cannot stand beside him, Silverfang said, and who carries, beneath all that noise, a warmth this den has not sensed in a very long time. You earned it tonight, in that arena, choosing coordination over glory even when glory alone would have been easier. For a moment, just a moment, Naruto let himself sit with it, the pride of it, before the earlier unease crept back in, tangled now with something new and unresolved. Okay, he said finally, steadying himself. Emberfang. I like it. He looked up, meeting Silverfang's gaze directly. Now tell me what happened. All of it. I want to understand exactly what I'm walking into before Jiraiya and I are stuck training together for the next month. Silverfang studied him for a long moment, weighing something Naruto couldn't quite read, and then, slowly, the ancient wolf began to speak, his voice carrying back across generations, back to a war fought long before Naruto or Jiraiya or anyone currently walking the elemental nations had ever drawn breath. But that, dear viewer, is a story that deserves the space of its own chapter, because trust me, what Silverfang is about to reveal is going to change everything Naruto thought he understood about the bond he's carried these past 2 months. Naruto's got a new name, a month of training with Jiraiya ahead of him, an old rift between two ancient clans about to come fully into the light, and somewhere out there in the arena stands a certain red-haired Sangenin whose killing intent hasn't stopped prickling at the edge of Naruto's senses since the moment he first walked into that exam room. The snow had stopped falling in the Wolf Den's central valley, the sky overhead settling into its usual permanent dusk-purple stillness, as Silverfang lowered himself onto the packed earth of the clearing, motioning for Naruto to sit across from him. Ash clouds settled nearby, quiet and watchful in a way that told Naruto this story mattered to her too, mattered perhaps more than she usually let herself show. 3 generations ago, Silverfang began, his voice carrying the particular weight of something rehearsed countless times in memory but rarely spoken aloud. The Wolf Clan was not hidden. We walked openly among the summoning contracts of your world, bonded to shinobi across every hidden village, respected, feared, in some corners, as fiercely as the toads or the slugs or the snakes ever were. So what happened? Naruto asked, careful, for once, not to interrupt further. War happened, Silverfang said simply. Not the war between villages you study in your academies, Stray, but something older, a conflict between 3 great summoning clans, fought across a span of years so brutal that few records of it survive even now, deliberately erased by those who benefited most from its outcome. He turned his gaze toward the mountain peaks in the distance, ice-blue eyes distant, remembering. The toads, the wolves, and the serpents once stood as 3 pillars of the summoning world, each bonded to different lines of shinobi, each holding to different codes of honor. For generations, an uneasy peace held between us, not friendship, precisely, but mutual respect, the kind that comes from clans powerful enough to make outright conflict a mutually unappealing prospect. That peace broke the year a toad sage, one of the most gifted your world had produced in a generation, made a choice that unraveled everything. Silverfang's voice hardened, old anger surfacing beneath the measured calm. A joint campaign had been organized. Wolves, toads, and the shinobi bonded to each clan, fighting together against a rising threat that endangered every hidden village equally. I was young then, by our standards, barely past my first century, but already trusted enough to lead a strike pack alongside the Toad Sage's own forces. The battle turned against us, he continued. Badly. My pack was pinned, outnumbered, cut off from retreat by an enemy far more cunning than any of us anticipated. I sent word through our shared summoner network, requesting reinforcement from the Toad forces stationed less than half a day's march away. Naruto leaned forward, dread already coiling in his stomach. And they didn't come. They did not come, Silverfang confirmed, voice flat with old, controlled fury. The Toad Sage judged the cost of reinforcement too high, the risk to his own forces too great, and made the calculation, coldly, deliberately, that my pack's survival mattered less than preserving his own numbers for battles still ahead. 43 wolves died that day, Stray, bonded shinobi alongside them, screaming for help that never came, while the Toad forces regrouped safely behind their own lines less than a few hours' run away. The silence that followed was heavy enough that even Ash Cloud, usually so quick with a dry remark to cut tension, said nothing at all. I survived, Silverfang said quietly. Barely. And when I finally dragged myself back to confront the sage who'd made that choice, do you know what he told me? Naruto shook his head, throat tight. He told me it was strategy, Silverfang said. That sacrifice was simply the cost of war, and that morning 43 lives lost to careful calculation was a weakness he expected better of from a clan leader my age. His voice, for the first time since Naruto had known him, trembled, not with sadness, but with something colder, older, and far more dangerous. I broke our contract with the Toad clan that same night. I gathered what remained of my den, and I withdrew every wolf still bonded to a human summoner back into hiding, sealing our contract away where no careless hand could ever endanger my kin again. That's... Naruto struggled to find words adequate to the weight of what he'd just heard. That's horrible. How could anyone just decide that? Like people's lives were just numbers? Because your world, Stray, has always struggled to separate strategy from cruelty, Silverfang said, and because power, unchecked by loyalty, curdles into precisely that kind of calculation, generation after generation, clan after clan. It is the very reason this den values pack above all else. Because a pack that abandons its wounded, its outnumbered, its desperate, is no pack at all. It is simply a collection of individuals waiting for their turn to be sacrificed. Naruto sat with that for a long moment, the weight of it settling deep into his chest, tangled up uncomfortably with everything he already knew about loneliness, about being abandoned, about doors closing quietly in his face his entire life. Is that why the scroll got sealed away? He asked finally. So nobody could ever use your clan like that again? Precisely, Silverfang said. For 3 generations, we remained hidden, watching your world continue its wars and its ambitions without us, trusting no summoner enough to risk what my den had already sacrificed once. He turned his gaze fully onto Naruto now, something old and searching in his ancient eyes. Which is why, Stray, your discovery of that hidden contract was never a simple accident to me. A seal that specific, buried that deliberately inside a scroll meant to stay locked away. It does not simply activate for anyone who happens to press a hand against it. Then why me? I have asked myself that question every day since that clearing, Silverfang admitted. The honest answer is that I do not fully know yet. But I have watched you closely these past months, Stray. Watched the instinct in you to shield a teammate mid-battle even when it costs you pain. Watched you refuse to abandon a wounded protector even facing a killer twice your strength. Watched you choose coordination over glory in that arena when glory alone would have been so much easier to claim. His voice softened. Whatever guided that seal to answer your hand and no others, I no longer believe it was accident. I believe it recognized, in you, precisely the quality my clan lost the night we were betrayed. Naruto swallowed hard, an unfamiliar lump rising in his throat. I'm not gonna do that, he said, voice fierce despite its unsteadiness. I'm never gonna leave anyone behind. Not you guys, not my team, not anyone. I promise. Something shifted in Silverfang's expression, not quite a smile, but something warm and ancient and deeply, quietly moved. I know, he said simply. It is why this den has already begun to trust you, faster than 3 generations of caution should reasonably allow. He rose, stretching, the moment of raw vulnerability folding back beneath his usual measured composure. But do not mistake this story for a warning against the toads as they exist today, Stray. The sage who made that choice died decades ago. Jiraiya was not yet born when that battle was fought. Whatever guilt he carries second-hand, inherited shame for a decision he had no part in making. He still seemed pretty shaken up about it, Naruto said. Good, Silverfang said. A clan that forgets its own cruelty is doomed to repeat it. If the Toad Sage's shame keeps him honest in how he treats you over this coming month, then perhaps some good may yet come from an old wound reopening. He studied Naruto carefully, but watch him closely regardless, Stray. Not with suspicion, but with the same clear eyes this den has taught you to watch everything. Old wounds do not always heal cleanly, even when the intentions surrounding them are good. Jiraiya, as it turned out, took his role as Naruto's temporary sensei with far more seriousness than his easygoing first impression had suggested, though it became clear, within the very first day of training, that a considerable amount of that seriousness was tangled up in guilt he clearly hadn't fully processed himself. All right, kid, he said, the morning after Naruto's late-night conversation with Silverfang, standing at the edge of a training ground that had been cleared specifically for their use. First things first, before we get into anything fancy, I need to see exactly what you can do. Show me this Fang Style I've been hearing about. Naruto obliged, running through a compressed version of everything Ash Cloud had drilled into him: the hurting footwork, the claw-shaped strikes, a small burst of coordinated shadow clones moving through the flanking pattern that had won him his match against Kiba. Jiraiya watched with sharp, careful attention, arms crossed, expression unreadable, until Naruto finally finished, breathing hard. Not bad, he said finally. Rough around the edges, but the bones of it are solid. That old wolf taught you well, even if I've got some choice words for him whenever we finally cross paths again. He paused, something flickering behind his eyes. You told him about our conversation, didn't you? About the history. Yeah, Naruto admitted. He told me everything. About the battle, and the reinforcements that never came, and exactly how badly my predecessor screwed up, Jiraiya finished grimly, running a hand through his spiky hair with a weary sigh. Yeah, that story doesn't get told much on our side either, kid, and for good reason. It's not exactly a proud chapter of Toad Clan history. Did you know? Before I told you, I mean? Pieces of it, Jiraiya admitted. My own master mentioned it once, years ago, in the kind of vague, guilt-heavy way that told me there was a lot more to the story than he was willing to share. I always figured it was ancient history, something buried too deep to ever matter again. He shook his head. Guess I figured wrong. He was quiet for a moment, staring out over the training ground with an expression considerably more subdued than his usual boisterous energy. I want you to know something, kid, he said finally. Whatever guilt I'm carrying about what happened between our clans, that's mine to deal with, not yours. And it's sure as hell not going to affect how I train you over this next month. If anything. He straightened, some of his usual confidence returning. If anything, it means I owe it to that old wolf, and to you, to make sure you walk out of this exam stronger than anyone in that arena expects. Call it making up for old debts, if you want to get poetic about it. I don't really care about debts, Naruto said honestly. I just want to actually be ready. For the exam. For whatever's coming. Something in Jiraiya's expression sharpened at that, a flicker of the same instinctive alertness Naruto had learned to associate with genuine danger. Yeah, Jiraiya said quietly. About that. There's something I need to ask you, kid, and I need you to answer honestly. He glanced around, as if checking for eavesdroppers, before lowering his voice. That Sangenin? The one with the gourd and the dead eyes. Have you noticed anything strange about him? Naruto's stomach tightened, memory of that cold, grinding killing intent flooding back immediately. Yeah, actually. He smells wrong. Not like a normal person, like something's caged up inside him, scraping to get out. Jiraiya's expression went very still. You can smell that? I've gotten good at reading killing intent, Naruto said. Wolf training. Why? What's wrong with him? Jiraiya was quiet for a long moment, weighing something carefully. I've got a theory, he said finally, one I'm not ready to share yet, because if I'm right, it's not something either of us should discuss out in the open like this. But I want you to trust that instinct, kid. Whatever your senses are telling you about that boy, trust it. And be ready, because if my theory's correct, this exam might turn out to be a lot more dangerous than anyone in that stadium currently expects. The warning settled heavy in Naruto's chest, tangled up with Silverfang's own cryptic caution from weeks earlier. There will be a moment where the easiest path and the right path diverge, and for the first time since arriving back in Konoha, Naruto felt a genuine, creeping unease about what exactly this final exam was going to demand of him. The month that followed unfolded in a punishing, exhilarating blur, split evenly between Jiraiya's rigorous, unconventional training methods during the day and Ash Cloud's relentless drills in the wolf den by night, a schedule that left Naruto perpetually exhausted, perpetually sore, and slowly but unmistakably, perpetually stronger. Jiraiya's training focused first on chakra control refinement, building on the tree-climbing breakthrough from the wave mission with an even more punishing exercise involving water surface walking, a task that required constant, minute adjustments Naruto found almost as frustrating as his earliest tree-climbing failures. You've got monstrous reserves, kid, Jiraiya told him, watching Naruto sink, once again, chest deep into a nearby pond. Uzumaki blood, probably. But raw power without control is just a bigger mess waiting to happen. We fix that control, and that Fang style of yours goes from promising to genuinely dangerous. Naruto, spluttering water out of his mouth, couldn't exactly argue with the logic, even as he privately suspected Jiraiya found his repeated dunkings more entertaining than strictly necessary. But it was during the second week, once basic control had improved enough to move forward, that Jiraiya introduced something that made Naruto's breath catch with genuine excitement. Your father, Jiraiya said, holding up a small, spinning orb of swirling chakra balanced delicately on his palm, invented this technique. Took him 3 years. I'm going to try to teach it to you considerably faster than that, mostly because we don't exactly have 3 years to spare. That's so cool, Naruto breathed, staring at the technique with open awe. What is it? Rasengan, Jiraiya said. And trust me, kid, by the time you've got even a basic version of this down, that howling Fang barrage of yours is going to look like a warm-up exercise by comparison. The training that followed was, without question, some of the most frustrating of Naruto's entire life, a deceptively simple technique that demanded a level of precise, three-dimensional chakra control that pushed even his considerable reserves to their absolute limit. Balloon after balloon burst uselessly in his hand. Water-filled rubber balls popped apart in soggy, unsatisfying failures, hour after hour, day after day. And yet, threaded through all that frustration, Naruto found something unexpected, a strange, satisfying symmetry between Jiraiya's teaching and everything Silverfang and Ash Cloud had already drilled into him. Where the wolf den had taught him to feel his chakra rather than force it, to trust instinct over rigid calculation, that same lesson, it turned out, applied just as powerfully to the Rasengan's demand for felt, intuitive control rather than brute mechanical effort. You're picking this up faster than I expected, Jiraiya admitted, genuine surprise coloring his voice as Naruto's chakra sphere held together, wobbling but intact, for nearly a full 3 seconds before finally destabilizing. Most genin take weeks just to get that far. Guess I've had good teachers, Naruto said, grinning despite his exhaustion. Jiraiya studied him for a moment, something contemplative in his expression. You know, kid, there's a reason I keep circling back to that old wolf's teaching whenever I try to figure out how you're improving so fast. Pack instinct, sensory training, felt chakra control instead of force control. That's not standard Toad Clan philosophy. That's something else entirely. He shook his head, half amused, half genuinely impressed. Whatever Silverfang's teaching you, it's making my job a lot easier than I expected. The knights, meanwhile, remained firmly the wolf den's domain, and Ash Cloud, true to form, showed no signs of easing her already brutal training regimen just because Naruto's days had gotten considerably more exhausting. You've got a month before that exam, she told him, the very first night of the training period, and Silverfang wants you ready for more than just another prelim match. Words already traveling through this den about what happened in that arena tonight. About the Sannin whose bloodlust reached all the way into a sealed valley most of your world doesn't even know exists. Naruto blinked, startled. Wait, you guys could sense that? From here? This den is old, Stray, Ash Cloud said, and its senses stretch farther than you'd believe. Whatever's caged inside that boy, it's old too, old and hungry and barely contained. If Silverfang's right, and I trust his instincts on matters like this more than almost anything else in this world, that boy is going to matter a great deal before this exam is through. It was that same night, deeper into their training session, that Ash Cloud finally introduced Naruto to a technique that had, up to this point, remained mysteriously absent from his curriculum, a technique she called, simply, the Howling Fang Barrage. This is a pack technique, she explained, demonstrating with a sharp, resonant howl that seemed to vibrate through Naruto's very bones despite its relatively modest volume. Not a single strike. A coordinated wave, clones and summons and your own strikes, timed together into a single overwhelming assault that no individual opponent, however skilled, can fully track or defend against. How do I even coordinate something like that? The same way you coordinated your clones against Kiba, Ash Cloud said. Feel the shape of the fight. Trust the pack, clone, summon yourself, to move as one unit rather than separate pieces. It won't come easily. It took me nearly 2 years to master this technique properly, and I expect it'll take you considerably longer than a month to perfect it fully. Then why teach it to me now? Because, Silverfang's voice cut in, the ancient wolf descending from his usual perch to join them, even an imperfect howling Fang barrage, executed with genuine pack coordination, carries more power than most fully mastered individual techniques. And I suspect, Stray, that before this exam concludes, you may find yourself needing every scrap of power this den can offer you. The warning settled uneasy in Naruto's chest, echoing Jiraiya's own cryptic caution from earlier that same week, and he found himself training that night with a renewed, almost desperate intensity, throwing himself into the technique's brutal, exhausting demands with everything he had, driven by a growing, unshakable certainty that whatever was coming, it was going to demand every ounce of strength he could possibly gather in time. It was nearly 3 weeks into the training period, Naruto's Rasengan finally holding stable for nearly 10 full seconds, his howling Fang barrage still rough and unpolished but undeniably functional, that the encounter Silverfang had seemed to be quietly dreading finally arrived. Naruto had ventured into Konoha's market district on a rare afternoon off, restocking supplies before another grueling training session, when that same cold, grinding killing intent from the exam arena suddenly flooded his senses, sharp and immediate and far closer than he'd expected. He turned to find Gaara standing several meters away, alone, gourd strapped to his back, dark-ringed eyes fixed directly on him with an intensity that made every hair on Naruto's body stand on end. "You," Gaara said, voice flat and strangely toneless. "Your presence feels different from the others." Naruto's hand instinctively drifted toward his kunai pouch, every instinct honed by months of scent training screaming caution, even as some deeper, more curious part of him held back from outright hostility. "Different how?" "Sharper," Gaara said. "Hungrier. Like something ancient is watching through your eyes." He tilted his head slightly, studying Naruto with an unsettling, clinical curiosity. "Mother says you are interesting. She rarely finds anything interesting." "Mother?" Naruto repeated, unease deepening. Gaara didn't elaborate, his gaze instead drifting briefly toward a group of children playing nearby, laughing and chasing each other with the carefree ease of kids who never once had to fight for their own existence. "Do you know what it feels like," Gaara said quietly, "to exist only to prove your own worth through killing? To have been given no other purpose, no other path, since before you could even walk?" Naruto's chest tightened, an unexpected, uncomfortable recognition rising up despite every warning instinct still screaming at him to stay alert. He thought of every isolated night in his own small apartment, every cold shoulder and slammed door, every year spent desperately proving he deserved to exist at all. "Yeah," he said quietly, surprising even himself with his honesty. "Actually, I kinda do." Something flickered across Gaara's expression, the barest, most fleeting crack in that otherwise unreadable stillness, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "Then perhaps," Gaara said, "when we meet in that arena, you will understand why I cannot afford to lose. Existence itself depends on it, for someone like me." He turned to leave, pausing only briefly. "I hope, for your sake, that whatever ancient thing walks beside you is strong enough to survive what I intend to prove there." He vanished into the crowd before Naruto could formulate any kind of response, leaving him standing frozen in the market street, Gaara's cold, weighted words settling heavy and unresolved in his chest. That night, back in the wolf den, Naruto relayed the entire encounter to Silverfang and Ash Cloud, watching both wolves' expressions grow increasingly grave as he spoke. "He said something's caged inside him," Naruto finished. "Something his mother, I don't even know if he meant that literally, finds him interesting because of it." Silverfang was quiet for a long moment, ice-blue eyes distant and troubled. "There are older bonds in this world than pact contracts, Stray," he said finally. "Bonds forced rather than chosen, creatures sealed against their will into vessels never meant to safely contain them. If what you describe is what I suspect, that boy is not merely dangerous. He is a vessel for something far older and far more volatile than either of us has faced directly in generations. Can I even help him?" Naruto asked, surprising himself with the question. He didn't really seem like he wanted a fight, not really. He seemed more like someone who has never once been shown another path, Silverfang finished quietly. "I understand the impulse, Stray. It speaks well of you. But be careful. Creatures cornered into believing violence is their only proof of worth do not always welcome an outstretched hand, however genuine." Sometimes that hand must be earned through struggle before it can ever be trusted. Naruto absorbed that in troubled silence, the weight of Gaara's words, existence itself depends on it, settling uneasily alongside everything else this month had already asked him to carry. The final week of training passed in an increasingly tense blur, Naruto's Rasengan finally solidifying into something genuinely reliable, his howling Fang barrage sharpening under ash clouds relentless, exacting standards into a technique he could, at last, execute with something resembling actual control. It was on the very last night before the exam's finals, standing once more atop Silverfang's familiar outcropping overlooking the snow-dusted valley, that the ancient wolf offered Naruto one final piece of counsel, quieter, more personal than anything he'd shared before. Tomorrow, you step into that arena carrying more than just your own name, Silverfang said. You carry mine. You carry this den's trust, hard-won and still, in some corners, uncertain. And you may well carry the weight of a boy whose entire existence has been shaped by forces as old and as painful as the ones that once broke my own pack apart. No pressure, Naruto muttered, only half joking. Silverfang's ancient eyes softened, just slightly. You have already proven, time and again, that you do not abandon what matters to you, stray, Emberfang. Whatever tomorrow brings, trust that instinct above all else. It has not failed you yet. Naruto nodded slowly. The weight of everything, the old wound between wolves and toads, Jiraiya's guilt-driven determination, Gaara's haunting, unresolved warning, Ash Cloud's relentless training, Silverfang's quiet, hard-earned trust, settling into something he could, at last, carry with steady shoulders rather than anxious dread. I won't let any of you down, he said quietly. Not the pack. Not my team. Not even that sand kid. If there's any way I can actually help him instead of just fighting him. Somewhere far below, across the sealed valley's frozen peaks, a low, resonant howl rose up in answer, not from Silverfang, not from Ash Cloud, but from dozens of wolves scattered across the den. An unspoken chorus of acknowledgement carried on the cold night wind. Naruto closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him, and for the first time since this entire journey began in a moonlit clearing 2 months ago, he felt something settle fully into place. Not certainty that tomorrow would go well, but certainty, at least, that whatever happened, he wouldn't be facing it as the lonely, hollow boy who'd once sat alone on an academy swing, watching a celebration he wasn't invited to. He had a name now. He had a pack. And tomorrow, the whole world was finally going to see exactly what that meant. The finals opened with a roar of crowd noise that Naruto could feel in his teeth. Tiered stands packed shoulder to shoulder with spectators from every hidden village, banners snapping in the breeze, the third Hokage seated in his private box with the calm, practiced dignity of a man who had presided over decades of these exact ceremonies. Naruto's first match came early in the bracket, against Neji Hyuga, the prodigy cousin who had, weeks earlier, delivered a brutal, almost cruel defeat to Hinata in the preliminaries. Wrapped in a cold philosophy about fate and bloodlines that Naruto found himself despising more with every word Neji spoke down at him from the arena floor. You're a failure clawing at a destiny that was never meant for you, Neji said, settling into his opening stance, pale, unblinking eyes tracking Naruto's every movement with clinical precision. The main branch, the cadet branch, the talented and the talentless. The world sorts itself according to rules older than either of us. Struggling against that only makes the fall more painful. Yeah, well, Naruto said, rolling his shoulders, feeling that familiar, steady warmth settle into his chest, the same warmth Silverfang had once described as the pack's heart, even when the pack cannot stand beside you. I've been hearing some version of that speech my whole life. Different words, same idea. And every single time, it's been wrong. What followed was a fight that had the entire stadium on its feet by the end. Neji's gentle fist technique probing for chakra points with terrifying precision. Naruto's clones scattering and reforming in the hurting patterns Ash Cloud had spent a month drilling into him, absorbing strike after strike that would have ended a less coordinated fighter in seconds. When Neji finally landed a blow that should have sealed Naruto's chakra points for good, Naruto's freshly mastered Rasengan tore straight through the technique's aftermath with raw, spinning force, driving Neji back and eventually, off his feet entirely. How, Neji gasped, staring up from the arena floor in genuine, stunned disbelief. Does someone with no bloodline, no clan, no destiny worth speaking of, keep standing back up? Because destiny's not something that happens to you, Naruto said, offering a hand down that Neji, after a long, searching pause, actually took. It's something you build, with the people who don't leave you behind. Maybe try building one with your own family sometime, instead of just accepting whatever story you've been told about them. It wasn't a grand, sweeping conversion. Neji's cold philosophy didn't crumble in a single afternoon, but something in his expression, walking off that arena floor, looked less certain of his own fatalism than it had an hour before, and that, Naruto figured, was a start. The matches that followed unfolded with their usual mix of tension and spectacle. Shikamaru's lazy, brilliant tactical victory over Temari that ended, characteristically, in his own forfeit rather than push the fight further than necessary. But it was the delay before the final match, Sasuke against Gaara, that finally cracked the day's carefully maintained calm wide open. Sasuke arrived late, Kakashi at his side, both of them radiating the particular exhaustion of someone who'd spent the last month pushing training to its absolute limit. The match, when it finally began, showcased just how far Sasuke's own abilities had grown, a blur of Sharingan tracked speed, the curse mark's dark influence flickering ominously across his skin as the fight wore on, culminating in a devastating Chidori strike that tore through one of Gaara's sand clones and left the crowd gasping. But Gaara's reaction to that strike, a low, guttural growl utterly unlike anything Naruto had heard from him before, sand curling protectively around his own body in thick, defensive plates, sent a fresh wave of unease crawling up Naruto's spine. Something's caged inside him, scraping to get out, he told Jiraiya weeks ago. Watching Gaara's composure crack in real time, Naruto understood, with sudden, sick clarity, exactly how close to the surface that something had already crept. And then the world went white. A massive genjutsu swept across the arena in an instant, the third Hokage's booth and the seats around it collapsing into chaos as sound and sand shinobi, hidden in plain sight among the crowd for hours, revealed themselves all at once. Smoke bombs bloomed across the stadium. Screaming erupted from every direction, and high above the arena floor, the third Hokage rose from his seat with grim, weathered resolve, facing down a figure Naruto recognized instantly, even through the elaborate disguise, the same golden, predatory eyes that had once studied him in the forest of death with unsettling interest. Orochimaru, Naruto breathed, horror and fury tangling together in his chest. There wasn't time to process the full scope of what was happening, not with chaos exploding across the entire village in every direction, Genin scrambling for cover, Chunin and Jonin rallying with the practiced, grim efficiency of shinobi who'd trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of emergency. Naruto's instincts, honed now by months of pack training, kicked in before conscious thought caught up. He bit his thumb hard, and slammed his palm against the arena floor. I need backup, he shouted into the smoke and chaos. Now! Silver mist billowed upward, and out of it, not just Frostpaw this time, but a full strike pack, 6 wolves of varying size and age, summoned together by a bond that had grown considerably stronger over these past months of dedicated training, emerged into the fractured battlefield, hackles raised, ember and gold eyes sweeping the chaos with sharp, immediate focus. At the head of the pack stood a wolf Naruto hadn't summoned before, larger than the others, dark-furred, with a scarred muzzle that spoke of real battle experience. It turned toward him with brief, businesslike acknowledgement. Silverfang sent word the moment he sensed this village's chakra spike, the wolf said, voice rough and clipped. We're here to hold ground. Direct us, Emberfang. Naruto's chest tightened at the sound of his earned name spoken with such immediate, unquestioning trust, and something in him steadied despite the chaos exploding around them. There's people trapped everywhere, he said, forcing his voice into something commanding despite his own racing heart. Civilians, wounded shinobi, anyone who can't fight needs to get clear. Can you guys track through smoke? Better than any human here, the dark-furred wolf confirmed. Name's Duskfang. Point us where you need us. What followed was, without exaggeration, one of the most harrowing hours of Naruto's young life. The strike pack fanning out across the burning, smoke-choked streets, tracking survivors by scent through collapsed buildings and shattered marketplaces, while Naruto himself, Fang Style and Shadow clones working in coordinated tandem, fought his way through sound shinobi determined to cut down anyone standing between them and the village's vulnerable civilian districts. In the version of this story most of you already know, several specific casualties occur during this chaos. Shinobi and civilians alike, caught in the wrong place at exactly the wrong moment. Their deaths a somber, permanent cost of Orochimaru's invasion. Tonight, with 6 wolves tearing through smoke and rubble with senses no human search team could match, a handful of those names never made it onto the village's memorial stone at all. A young Chunin, pinned beneath a collapsed support beam in a burning weapon shop, found himself hauled free by Duskfang's powerful jaws seconds before the ceiling gave way entirely. An elderly civilian couple, disoriented and lost in the smoke 2 streets over from their actual home, were guided to safety by a wolf named Silt who refused to leave their side even as chaos raged around them. A genin from a visiting village, badly wounded and abandoned by his own fleeing team, was found and shielded by Frostpaw's fierce, snarling defense until reinforcements could arrive. None of it made the invasion painless. None of it undid the very real horror unfolding across the village that day. But small ripples, Naruto would learn later, have a way of becoming larger ones, and this was only the first of many small ripples this particular choice had set into motion. He found Sakura eventually, sheltering a group of academy students in the lee of a half-collapsed building, her face pale but her hands steady as she worked to bandage a cut along one child's arm. Naruto! Relief flooded her expression the instant she spotted him. Where's Sasuke? Have you seen him? Naruto's stomach dropped. In all the chaos, he'd lost track of Sasuke entirely. The last he'd seen, his teammate had been chasing Gaara, who'd fled the arena the moment the invasion began. The curse mark's influence apparently pulling him towards something desperate and dangerous. He went after Gaara, Naruto said. I gotta find him. Then go! Sakura said fiercely, despite the fear still evident in her voice. I've got this handled. These kids need someone here anyway. Go help Sasuke. Naruto nodded, already turning, Duskfang appearing at his side with the silent, easy loyalty of a pack member falling naturally into formation. I'll track him, Duskfang said. His sense still fresh enough to follow, even through all this smoke. They found Sasuke at the village's outer wall, breathing hard, staring out at a rapidly retreating trail of displaced sand where Gaara had clearly fled the village entirely, dragged along by a transformation so grotesque and overwhelming that even Sasuke, battle-hardened as he'd become, looked visibly shaken by what he'd witnessed. He's not human anymore, Sasuke said grimly, as Naruto and Duskfang caught up. Not fully. Whatever's inside him, it took over completely. We have to stop him before he hurts anyone else, Naruto said. Sasuke's dark eyes flicked toward Duskfang, taking in the massive wolf's presence with only the barest flicker of surprise. After months of watching Naruto's abilities develop, very little about his teammates seemed to shock him anymore. Then let's go, Sasuke said simply. The chase that followed carried them deep into the forest surrounding Konoha, Shikamaru and a hastily assembled team of genin joining partway through, a retrieval mission that would, in the days ahead, become one of the more storied efforts of the entire invasion's aftermath. But the confrontation that mattered most, the one that would come to define this particular chapter of Naruto's journey, unfolded between 3 figures alone in a small forest clearing: Naruto, Sasuke, and a transformed, half-feral Gaara whose sand-covered form radiated a killing intent so overwhelming it made even Duskfang's hackles rise in genuine alarm. You feel it too, Gaara rasped, voice distorted and layered with something ancient and inhuman beneath his own. The proof of existence. I only feel real when I fight for my life. That's not existence, Naruto shot back, forcing steadiness into his voice despite every instinct screaming danger. That's just running from something that's using you. There's more to being real than killing people, Gaara. What would you know about it? Gaara's voice cracked, raw and furious beneath the monstrous distortion. You have a village. Teammates. People who chose to stand beside you. I have nothing but this thing inside me that everyone fears, that everyone uses, that has never once let me feel anything except the moment before someone dies. Something in that admission struck deep, familiar chords in Naruto's own chest. The years of isolation, the doors closing, the desperate hunger to matter to someone, anyone, that had defined his own life until Silverfang's silver mist had first curled up out of that clearing months ago. You're wrong, Naruto said quietly, stepping forward despite Sasuke's sharp, warning glance. I know exactly what it's like to have nothing, to grow up completely alone, hated by people who never even gave you a chance to prove them wrong. I spent years thinking the only way anyone would ever look at me was if I forced them to. He held Gaara's monstrous, half-transformed gaze steadily. But it doesn't have to stay that way. I found something, someone, who chose me back, and it changed everything. It's not too late for you either. For one long, suspended moment, something flickered in Gaara's chaotic, sand-shrouded expression, a crack of genuine uncertainty in an otherwise overwhelming wave of monstrous rage, and then the moment shattered, the caged thing inside him surging back to the surface with renewed, desperate violence, and the fight that followed left little room for further words. It was brutal, close, and genuinely terrifying, Gaara's sand lashing out with overwhelming force, Sasuke's Chidori cutting through defensive barriers that reformed almost as quickly as they were destroyed, Naruto's Rasengan finally landing a decisive blow that, combined with the rising sun's chakra-draining effect on Gaara's transformation, finally broke the monstrous form apart, leaving a shaking, exhausted boy collapsed in the settling dust, tears streaking silently down a face that, for the first time since Naruto had met him, looked genuinely, achingly young. His siblings, Temari and Kankuro, arrived moments later, gathering him up with careful, protective urgency, retreating from the clearing without further conflict, an unspoken acknowledgement that whatever had happened here, the fight, at least for today, was over. Why, Gaara rasped, one last time, as his siblings hauled him away, did you try to save someone who wanted to kill you? Naruto met his gaze steadily, exhausted but resolute. Because that's what Pack does, he said simply. Even for someone who isn't part of it yet. They returned to Konoha to find a village transformed by grief. The third Hokage, they learned upon arrival, had fallen in single combat against Orochimaru, a battle so fierce and so costly that even the Sannin himself had been forced to retreat, badly wounded, deep into hiding rather than press whatever advantage he'd gained. The old man's death rippled through the entire village like a physical blow, mourning banners replacing celebration banners within days, the funeral procession drawing crowds so vast they stretched from one end of Konoha to the other. Naruto stood at the edges of that funeral, Iruka beside him, fully recovered now, but visibly shaken by the loss of a man who'd guided and protected the village for decades, watching the procession with a heavy, unfamiliar grief settling into his chest. He always believed in you, Iruka said quietly, watching Naruto's expression. Even when the rest of the village struggled to. I hope you know that. I know, Naruto said softly. I just wish I could have done more. You did plenty, Iruka said. More than most genin your age could ever manage. Don't let grief convince you otherwise. That night, alone in his apartment, Naruto slipped away into the wolf den's cold embrace, finding Silverfang waiting with quiet, somber patience. You carry heavy grief tonight, Emberfang, the old wolf observed. The Hokage died, Naruto said, voice tight. Even with everything, the pack, the training, all of it, I couldn't stop it. Couldn't save him. No, Silverfang agreed gently. Some losses cannot be prevented, however strong the pack around them becomes. That is not failure, Emberfang. That is simply the cost every pack eventually learns to carry. He studied Naruto carefully. But you saved others tonight who would not otherwise have survived. That, too, matters, perhaps more than you currently have the perspective to appreciate. Naruto absorbed that in heavy silence, the weight of the day settling slowly into something he could, eventually, carry forward rather than be crushed beneath. Weeks passed in the invasion's uneasy aftermath, Konoha rebuilding, mourning, slowly finding its footing again under the interim leadership of the village elders while a search began, quiet but urgent, for a new Hokage worthy of the title. Naruto's own days settled into a strange, unfamiliar rhythm, training continuing with Ash Cloud and, when his schedule allowed, brief check-ins with Jiraiya, who'd taken on the added responsibility of tracking Orochimaru's movements in the wake of the third's death. It was during this uneasy calm that the true weight of Sasuke's curse mark finally reasserted itself. Naruto had noticed the signs building for days, Sasuke growing increasingly withdrawn, increasingly restless. The mark on his neck visibly darkening during sparring sessions in ways that left even Kakashi's expression carefully, deliberately neutral. But it was on a quiet, unremarkable evening, returning from a routine training session, that Naruto's senses caught something that sent ice flooding through his veins. 4 unfamiliar chakra signatures, moving through Konoha's outer forest with careful, deliberate stealth, and beneath them, faint but unmistakable, the same predatory, curse mark lace scent Naruto remembered from his own brief, terrifying encounter with Orochimaru in the Forest of Death. They're here for Sasuke, he realized, horror flooding through him. Orochimaru's people are here for Sasuke. He didn't waste time deliberating. He ran. He found Sakura first, at the edge of the village, tears streaking down her face as she stared out into the darkened forest with an expression of raw, devastated grief. He's gone, she said, voice breaking. Sasuke, he left. He said he needed power, that Orochimaru could give him what he needed to beat his brother, and I tried to stop him. I begged him to stay, but, which way? Naruto cut in, urgency overriding every other instinct. Sakura pointed a shaking hand toward the forest's edge. That way. Naruto, please bring him back. Please. I will, Naruto promised, already turning to run. I promise, Sakura. I won't leave him behind. Shikamaru intercepted him minutes later, already assembling a hastily gathered retrieval team, Kiba, Choji, Niji, and Shikamaru himself, all of them grim-faced and determined despite the clear danger of the mission ahead. We're coming with you, Shikamaru said simply. Nobody chases down 4 enemy shinobi alone, Naruto. Not even you. Naruto nodded, grateful beyond words, and together the 5 of them plunged into the darkened forest after their fleeing teammate, unaware, as they departed, that a 6th presence had already slipped silently into the shadows behind them, moving with a swift, quiet grace that no human tracker could have hoped to match. The retrieval mission that followed tested every one of them to their absolute limits, Kiba and Choji falling, one by one, to the Sound 4's overwhelming individual strength, each sacrifice buying Naruto precious ground as he pressed onward, increasingly desperate, increasingly alone, toward the massive waterfall valley where Sasuke had finally, reluctantly, agreed to pause his flight. The Valley of the End stretched out before Naruto as he finally broke through the tree line, 2 colossal stone statues facing each other across a roaring waterfall, ancient monuments to a legendary battle fought generations before either of them had been born. Sasuke stood atop the water's edge, back turned, silent and still. Sasuke! Naruto's voice cracked across the valley, raw with exhaustion and desperate urgency. Don't do this! Whatever Orochimaru's offering you, it's not worth what you're about to lose. Sasuke turned slowly, the curse mark's dark influence visible across half his face, eyes cold and distant in a way that made Naruto's chest ache with old, familiar dread. You don't understand, Sasuke said quietly. You never had to watch your entire clan die in a single night. You never had to live with the knowledge that the person responsible is still out there, stronger than you'll ever be unless you take every advantage offered to you. I understand loss better than you think, Naruto shot back. I understand what it's like to have nothing, to be completely alone. But going to Orochimaru isn't gonna fix that, Sasuke. It's just gonna make you into another version of him. Someone who uses power to fill up a hole that power was never gonna fix in the first place. Then what would you have me do? Sasuke's voice cracked, raw fury and grief bleeding through his usual controlled composure. Just accept being weak? Watch Itachi walk free forever while I stay exactly this powerless? You're not powerless! Naruto shouted. You've got a team. You've got people who'd fight beside you against anything, if you just let them. That's not weakness, Sasuke. That's the only thing strong enough to actually beat someone like your brother in the end. For a long, charged moment, something flickered in Sasuke's expression, genuine hesitation, a crack in his cold resolve that gave Naruto real, fleeting hope. And then it hardened again, colder and more final than before. I'm sorry, Naruto, Sasuke said quietly. But I've already made my choice. The fight that followed was, without question, the most brutal and heartbreaking battle Naruto had faced in his entire short career. 2 former teammates, once genuinely beginning to trust each other, now locked in a desperate, escalating clash that tore through the valley's ancient stonework, each of them drawing on every technique, every ounce of strength, that months of relentless training had given them. Sasuke's curse marks surged fully across his body midway through the fight, granting him terrifying speed and strength that pushed Naruto to his absolute limit. Naruto's own Rasengan and Fang Style, honed by months in the wolf den, proved just barely sufficient to keep pace, each exchange leaving both boys more battered, more exhausted, more desperate than the last. It was in the fight's final, decisive exchange, both boys channeling everything they had left into one final, opposing technique, Chidori against Rasengan, blue lightning against swirling silver blue chakra, that the months of wolf den training finally proved their worth in a way neither boy fully anticipated. Because in the version of this story most viewers already know, that final clash ends with both boys collapsing, exhausted, Sasuke walking away with his back turned, leaving Naruto alone and broken at the valley's edge. Tonight something different happened. As the two techniques collided in a thunderous explosion of chakra and stone dust, Naruto's honed, pack-trained instincts, the same instincts that had once helped him read Zabuza's ambush before anyone else, the same instincts that had helped him predict Kiba's every move in the prelims, caught something in the fractional half-second before impact, a subtle shift in Sasuke's stance, a barely perceptible overextension born of exhaustion and the curse mark's destabilizing strain. Naruto adjusted mid-strike, in a way no untrained fighter could have managed, not enough to fully overpower Sasuke's technique, but enough to redirect the full force of the collision at an angle that spared them both the worst of the blast while still, decisively, ending the exchange in Naruto's favor. Sasuke hit the ground hard, curse mark's dark markings finally receding from his skin as his chakra gave out entirely, and this time, crucially, differently, he didn't have the strength left to rise and walk away. Naruto, bruised and bleeding and barely standing himself, dragged himself across the shattered stone to kneel beside his fallen teammate, exhaustion and grief and fierce, protective relief tangling together in his chest. "I'm not gonna leave you here," he said quietly, voice raw. "Not like this. Not ever." It was as he knelt there, gathering what remained of his strength to lift Sasuke's unconscious weight, that a quiet, familiar voice spoke from the tree line behind him. "You did well, Stray." Naruto's head snapped up to find Ash Cloud emerging from the shadows, gold eyes taking in the wreckage of the valley, the exhausted, battered state of both boys, with careful, evaluating attention. "Ash Cloud?" Naruto's voice cracked with disbelief and exhausted relief. "You were here? This whole time?" "Silverfang's orders," she said simply. He suspected this confrontation was coming days ago, some instinct he wouldn't fully explain, even to me. "He asked me to trail you, quietly, in case things went badly enough to require intervention." "Why didn't you help?" "Because you didn't need it," Ash Cloud said. "Not for this. This was a fight you needed to finish yourself, Stray, and interfering would have cost you something more important than the outcome." She studied him for a long moment, something unusually gentle in her sharp gold eyes. "You held on to him. Even now, exhausted and broken as you are, your first instinct was to bring him home rather than leave him behind. That is, Silverfang, precisely the quality this den values above all else." Naruto let out a shaky breath, some of the day's overwhelming weight finally beginning to ease. "There's something else," Ash Cloud continued, her expression shifting into something more serious. "Silverfang asked me to deliver a message, once this confrontation concluded. He says it's time to move your training forward, beyond Fang Style, beyond the Howling Fang barrage, beyond anything this den has taught you so far." Naruto blinked, exhausted curiosity cutting through his fatigue. "Move forward how?" Ash Cloud's gold eyes held his steadily, something weighty and significant settling into her expression. "He believes you're ready to begin training toward Wolf Sage mode," she said. "A path this den has not attempted to walk with any bonded human in longer than even Silverfang can fully remember. But he says the choice, like everything in this den, must be yours to make, not his to demand." Naruto stared at her, the exhaustion of the day momentarily forgotten beneath a fresh, electric surge of anticipation, gazing down at Sasuke's unconscious form, at the shattered valley around them, at everything this journey had already cost and demanded and given him in equal measure. "Yeah," he said finally, voice steady despite everything. "Tell Silverfang I'm ready. Whatever it takes." Somewhere far above the valley, carried on the cold night wind, a distant howl rose up in answer, and Naruto, exhausted, bruised, and carrying his fallen teammate home at last, allowed himself, for the first time in a very long day, the smallest flicker of a smile. The invasion's over, Sasuke's coming home instead of walking straight into Orochimaru's hands, and Silverfang's just opened the door to something this den hasn't attempted in generations. But Wolf Sage mode isn't going to come easy, and if you've learned anything from this story so far, you already know that means the next stretch of Naruto's journey is about to get a whole lot harder before it gets easier. The 2.5 years that followed Sasuke's retrieval didn't unfold as a single continuous story so much as a long, demanding season of growth, stretched across two very different worlds that Naruto found himself increasingly determined to master in parallel. In Konoha, life resumed its familiar shape, though changed by everything the invasion had cost. A new Hokage was eventually chosen, Tsunade of the Sannin, coaxed back to the village by Jiraiya's persistent effort, and, in no small part, by Naruto's own stubborn insistence that she owed it to a village still grieving to step up and lead it. Sasuke, quieter and more guarded than before but unmistakably present, resumed training alongside Sakura under Kakashi's continued guidance. The bond between the three of them fractured in places but never fully broken, a fact Naruto privately credited, more than once, to whatever instinct had guided his hand at the Valley of the End. And Naruto himself, once Tsunade's healing hands had mended the worst of his injuries, found himself standing before Jiraiya with a proposition that would shape the better part of the next 2.5 years of his life. "I'm going with you," he said, the morning after Tsunade's official installation as 5th Hokage. "Training trip. Whatever you've got planned for me, I'm ready." Jiraiya studied him for a long moment, something contemplative behind his usual easy grin. "You sure about that, kid? Toad Mountain training's not exactly a walk in the park. Fukasaku and Shima don't go easy on anyone, human or otherwise." "I'm sure," Naruto said. "But there's something else too." He hesitated, weighing how to phrase it. "Silverfang wants to start training me towards something called Wolf Sage mode. I don't fully understand what that means yet, but I know it's important, and I know I can't learn it without also spending real time in the den. So I figured, maybe I do both. Split my time, your training and theirs." Jiraiya's expression sobered, some old, careful weight settling behind his eyes. "Wolf Sage mode," he repeated slowly. "Kid, do you have any idea what you're actually asking for? Sage techniques aren't just stronger jutsu. They're a fundamental rewiring of how a person draws on the natural world around them. Toad Sage training nearly kills genin who attempt it unprepared, turns them to stone if they get the balance wrong. I've got no idea what the wolf equivalent even looks like, and neither, I'd wager, does Silverfang, not for a human bonded to his clan in 3 generations. I know it's dangerous," Naruto said. "But I also know I need this. Whatever's coming, and something's coming, I can feel it. I'm not gonna be strong enough with just one path. I need both." Jiraiya studied him for a long, searching moment, and then, finally, let out a slow breath and nodded. "All right, kid. We'll split the trip. Toad training when I've got you, wolf training whenever that scroll of yours calls you home. But I want your word, the second either training path becomes more dangerous than it's worth, you tell me. No stubborn pride, no pushing past the warning sign because you're too proud to admit you're in over your head. Deal," Naruto said, without hesitation. He didn't yet fully understand exactly how demanding that deal was about to become. But then again, dear viewer, he rarely did, and somehow, he always found a way through anyway. The training trip's early months settled into an exhausting but surprisingly productive rhythm. Days spent under Jiraiya's guidance, expanding his Rasengan's versatility, sharpening his overall shinobi fundamentals, learning to read terrain and enemy movement with a tactical eye Jiraiya insisted was every bit as important as raw jutsu power, gave way, whenever the small wolf-sealed scroll pulsed its familiar silver light, to nights and sometimes full days spent deep in the wolf den's frozen valleys. It was during one of these early visits, several weeks into the trip, that Silverfang finally led Naruto toward a part of the den he'd never visited before, a steep, narrow trail winding up through jagged, snow-heavy peaks toward a single, isolated summit that seemed to pierce directly into the valley's permanent dusk-purple sky. "Howling Peak," Silverfang said, as they climbed, his massive paws finding sure footing on terrain that had Naruto slipping and stumbling behind him more than once. "The sacred ground where this den's sages have trained since long before even my own memory begins. It has stood empty for 3 generations, Emberfang. You are about to become the first to walk its summit since our clan went into hiding. No pressure, Naruto muttered, echoing his own words from weeks earlier, though this time the weight behind them felt considerably heavier. They crested the summit as the last of the climb gave way to a wide, flat plateau, wind howling fiercely across exposed rock, the valley stretching out in a breathtaking, dizzying panorama below. Ash Cloud was already waiting there, along with a second wolf Naruto hadn't met before, ancient, white-furred, moving with the slow, deliberate care of true elderly age, ice blue eyes clouded but still sharp with unmistakable intelligence. This is Frostmane, Silverfang said. Eldest among us beyond even myself, and the last wolf in this den to have ever achieved sage state before our clan's isolation began. She will guide your training here, alongside myself and Ash Cloud. Frostmane inclined her ancient head slowly toward Naruto, studying him with a careful, searching attention that made him feel, once again, like he was being weighed against some standard he couldn't fully see. So, she said, voice raspy with age but carrying an unmistakable authority, this is the stray who reawakened our contract. Tell me, pup, what do you understand of sage power? Not much, Naruto admitted honestly. Jiraiya told me a little about the toad version. Something about balancing natural energy with your own chakra, or you turn to stone. An apt if incomplete summary, Frostmane said. But do not mistake the toad path for the only path, stray. Every clan draws upon nature differently, according to the philosophy that shapes them. She turned, gesturing with a slow, deliberate motion toward the vast, wind-swept valley below. The toads achieve their balance through profound stillness, sitting motionless for hours, days even, drawing natural energy inward through patient, solitary meditation. It is a path built on solitude and inner focus, fitting a clan that values individual wisdom above all else. That's not gonna work for you, Naruto guessed. No, Silverfang confirmed. Our clan does not draw strength from stillness, Emberfang. We draw it from motion, from unity, from the shared rhythm of a pack running as one across open ground. Wolf's sage training will demand something considerably different from you than anything the toads could teach, and considerably more physically punishing, I suspect, than sitting still ever was. Naruto's stomach flipped with a mixture of nervous excitement and genuine unease. So what exactly do I need to do? Frostmane's clouded eyes settled on him with ancient, patient weight. You run, stray. You run with the pack, not alone, not at your own pace, but in perfect, sustained rhythm with wolves whose stamina and instinct you cannot hope to naturally match. You howl, in true unison, until your voice and theirs become nearly indistinguishable. And somewhere in that sustained, exhausting unity, if you are fortunate, if your bond with this den is genuine enough to sustain it, nature's chakra will respond not to your stillness, but to your belonging. That sounds... Naruto hesitated. Honestly, that sounds a lot easier than sitting still for hours. Ash Cloud let out a short, humorless laugh. Don't get cocky, stray. Nothing about this is easy. You'll understand exactly what I mean within the first hour. She was, as it turned out, entirely correct. The first attempt at wolf sage training began at dawn the following day, or what passed for dawn in a valley whose sky never quite committed to full daylight, with Naruto standing at the base of Howling Peak's summit trail, surrounded by a full pack of nearly 20 wolves, all of them radiating the same coiled, restless energy of runners waiting for a starting signal. The rules are simple, Frostmane explained, positioning herself at the pack's head. Run with us. Match our pace, match our rhythm, and when the moment calls for it, add your voice to ours. Fall behind, and the exercise ends in failure. Simple to explain. Considerably harder to achieve. Naruto rolled his shoulders, bouncing slightly on his feet with nervous energy. I've got stamina for days. This'll be easy. We shall see, Frostmane said, and then, without further warning, the entire pack surged forward as one, and Naruto's overconfident grin lasted almost exactly 4 seconds before reality set in with brutal, humbling force. Wolves, it turned out, did not run the way humans ran. They moved with a fluid, effortless economy of motion that ate up ground at a pace Naruto's admittedly impressive shinobi conditioning simply hadn't prepared him for, weaving through the valley's jagged, uneven terrain with an instinctive grace that made his own increasingly desperate, stumbling pursuit look almost comically inadequate by comparison. He fell behind within the first mile. He fell behind considerably further within the second. By the time the pack circled back, patient but visibly unimpressed, to collect him from where he'd finally collapsed, gasping, against a snow-dusted boulder, Naruto had a newfound, humbling respect for exactly how far his training still had to go. That, Ash Cloud observed, trotting up beside him with an expression that mixed genuine sympathy with unmistakable amusement, was considerably worse than I expected, and I was already expecting it to go badly. Shut up, Naruto wheezed, flat on his back in the snow. Again tomorrow, Frostmane said, unbothered by his exhaustion. And the day after. And the day after that, for as long as it takes your body to learn what your mind has already accepted, that you belong in this rhythm, even when your legs insist otherwise. The weeks that followed blurred into a punishing, exhausting cycle, running until his legs gave out, day after day, gradually, painfully building the stamina and coordination the pack's sustained pace demanded, interspersed with equally demanding sessions with Jiraiya focused on chakra theory, elemental affinity training, and increasingly complex applications of his still-developing Rasengan. It was during one of these Toad-focused sessions, several months into the trip, that Jiraiya finally introduced Naruto to actual natural energy sensing, a foundational skill, he explained, that would matter regardless of which sage path Naruto ultimately pursued. Feel the energy around you, Jiraiya instructed, guiding Naruto through his first careful, tentative attempts at drawing natural chakra into his system. Not forcing it, not grabbing at it, just opening yourself to it, the way you'd let sunlight warm your skin instead of trying to physically seize it. Naruto closed his eyes, reaching for that same felt, intuitive sense that had carried him through so much of his wolf den training, and for one brief, electric moment, felt something vast and ancient brush against the edges of his awareness. The deep, patient hum of the surrounding forest, the slow pulse of the earth beneath him, a texture to the world he'd never consciously registered before. And then, just as quickly, the sensation overwhelmed him, his features beginning to shift and distort in ways that had nothing to do with wolves at all, a faint, amphibian roughness spreading across his skin, his eyes beginning to take on a horizontal, toad-like slit. Naruto! Snap out of it! Jiraiya's sharp command cut through the overwhelming sensation, and with considerable, gasping effort, Naruto managed to pull himself back from the edge, the strange transformation receding as quickly as it had begun, leaving him shaking and disoriented on the forest floor. What was that? He managed, staring down at his own hands with unsettled fascination. That, Jiraiya said grimly, is exactly why this training kills genin who rush it. Too much natural energy, absorbed too fast without proper balance, and your body starts transforming into something considerably less human. Push it too far, you turn fully to stone, permanently, if nobody's around to break the transformation before it locks in. He studied Naruto carefully. You held it together longer than I expected for a first attempt. But we go slow from here, kid. No exceptions. Naruto nodded, shaken but undeterred, filing the experience away alongside everything Frostmane had already warned him about the dangers waiting on the wolf path as well. 2 sage disciplines, it seemed, meant twice the danger, but also, he was slowly beginning to suspect, a strength that neither path alone could ever fully provide. Back at Howling Peak, months of relentless training had finally, gradually, begun paying dividends. Naruto's stamina, built through weeks of grueling pack runs, had grown to the point where he could sustain the pack's demanding pace for nearly the full duration of their training circuits, not gracefully, not without visible strain, but consistently enough that Frostmane's initial skepticism had softened, bit by bit, into something resembling cautious approval. You've earned the right to attempt the next stage, she announced one morning, nearly 5 months into the training trip, as Naruto collapsed, exhausted but triumphant, at the end of yet another brutal circuit. The howl. What's involved with that, exactly? Naruto asked warily, still catching his breath. Unity, Frostmane said simply. You will run with the pack, as before. But at the peak of the run, when your body and breath and heartbeat have finally, fully synchronized with those around you, you will howl, not as a separate voice joining a chorus, but as a single voice indistinguishable from the whole. If you succeed, even briefly, natural energy will begin to respond. And if I don't succeed? Silverfang, watching from nearby, answered that one himself. Then you will fall short, as you have fallen short many times already in this training, and you will try again. Failure here carries none of the physical danger the toad path carries, Emberfang. Our path punishes overconfidence with exhaustion, not transformation. Small mercy, perhaps, but a mercy nonetheless. That small mercy, Naruto would soon discover, didn't make the actual attempt any less grueling. The first dozen attempts ended in humiliating, exhausting failure, his howl, however sincere his effort, remaining stubbornly, audibly separate from the pack's unified chorus, a jarring, discordant note breaking the harmony every single time. He tried harder. He tried louder. Neither approach worked, and Ash Cloud, watching his increasingly frustrated attempts with her usual blunt honesty, finally pulled him aside after his 15th consecutive failure. You're fighting it, she told him. Same mistake as the tree-climbing exercise, if you think back far enough. You're trying to force your voice into the pack's rhythm through sheer stubborn will, the same way you tried to force chakra control before you learned to actually feel it instead. Then what am I supposed to do differently? Stop trying to join the pack, Ash Cloud said. Remember that you already are the pack. There's a difference, Stray, between forcing yourself into unity and simply recognizing unity that already exists. Naruto turned that over carefully, exhausted frustration slowly giving way to quiet, thoughtful consideration. He thought of every moment these past months that had actually, genuinely mattered. Dusk Fang hauling survivors free of collapsed buildings during the invasion. Frostpaw snarling defiance in defense of a stranger's wounded genin. Ash Cloud's blunt, relentless honesty that had carried him through failure after failure without once letting him quit. He thought of Silverfang's old wound, of 43 wolves lost to a betrayal 3 generations gone, and the fierce, unshakable promise he'd made never to let that happen again on his own watch. I'm not joining something separate from me, he realized, something settling quietly into place in his chest. This already is me. The next attempt began the same way as all the others, the pack surging forward as one, Naruto pushing his exhausted body to match their brutal, unrelenting pace. But as the run reached its peak, as his breath and heartbeat finally settled into that familiar, hard-won synchronization, he didn't consciously decide to howl at all. It simply happened, his voice rising alongside dozens of others, and for one brief, electric moment, something in the air around him shifted, subtle but unmistakable, a faint golden shimmer gathering at the edges of his vision that had nothing to do with any technique he'd consciously activated. The pack drew to a stop, and Naruto, still catching his breath, looked down at his own hands to find faint, golden-orange markings tracing briefly across his skin before fading away entirely, the sensation of that gathered natural energy dispersing as quickly as it had arrived. Frostmane's ancient eyes widened, genuine astonishment crossing her weathered features. That, she said slowly, was real, Stray. Fleeting, nowhere near sustained mastery, but genuinely real. I did it? Naruto asked, disbelieving. You began, Silverfang corrected, though the pride evident in his voice softened the correction considerably. A beginning, Emberfang, 5 months in the making. The path ahead remains long, but you have proven tonight that this path is genuinely walkable for you. That alone is no small thing. The months that followed brought steady, if punishing, progress. Naruto's fleeting glimpses of that golden-tinged natural energy state growing gradually longer and more stable with each attempt, even as the physical toll of sustaining the pack's brutal training pace left him perpetually exhausted, his body gradually reshaping itself under the combined demands of 2 entirely different sage disciplines. It was during this period that the first genuinely alarming side effects began to surface. Moments during particularly intense training sessions where his features would shift unstably between forms, faint whisker marks deepening into something more pronounced, fangs sharpening briefly before receding, his eyes flickering between his normal blue and a wilder amber gold that unsettled even the wolves around him. This is concerning, Frostmane admitted, after one particularly severe episode left Naruto shaking and disoriented on the training ground, his transformation taking considerably longer than usual to fully recede. 2 sage disciplines, drawn upon in such close proximity, may be placing strain on your body that neither path alone was ever designed to withstand. I can handle it, Naruto insisted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed real uncertainty. That is precisely the kind of overconfidence that gets young sages killed, Silverfang said sharply, uncharacteristic urgency entering his ancient voice. You promised the Toad Sage you would recognize your limits rather than push blindly past them, Silverfang. I ask the same promise of this den. If your body cannot safely sustain both disciplines simultaneously, we will find another way forward, but we will not sacrifice your safety to stubborn pride. Naruto, chastened, nodded slowly, the memory of Jiraiya's own careful warning echoing alongside Silverfang's. Okay, he said quietly. I'll be more careful. I promise. It was a promise he mostly managed to keep, though mostly carried its own quiet weight of near misses and cautious retreats over the following months, each one a humbling reminder of exactly how dangerous this dual path genuinely was. Jiraiya, for his part, remained largely unaware of just how demanding Naruto's parallel wolf training had become, occupied, for long stretches, with his own network of information gathering, tracking rumors of Akatsuki's movements across the elemental nations with an increasingly grim, focused urgency that occasionally spilled over into their shared training sessions. It was during one such session, nearly a year into the trip, that Jiraiya finally sat Naruto down with an expression far more serious than his usual easy demeanor allowed. There's something I need to tell you, he said, about the organization that's after you specifically. Akatsuki, Naruto said. I've heard the name. Sasuke's brother is part of it, right? That's right, Jiraiya confirmed. And I've been piecing together intelligence on them for months now, enough to worry me considerably more than I'd like to admit. He studied Naruto carefully. They're after Jinchuriki, kid. All of them, one by one, working their way across every hidden village. You're on that list. Naruto's stomach tightened, old, familiar unease resurfacing. Because of Kurama. Because of Kurama, Jiraiya confirmed. But that's not the only reason I'm telling you this now. He paused, weighing his next words carefully. I've picked up something else, kid, rumors still unconfirmed, but persistent enough that I can't dismiss them. Word that Akatsuki's become aware of your wolf contract, that they're treating you as more than just another Jinchuriki target now. Naruto's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I mean, Jiraiya said grimly, that an organization capable of hunting down every tailed beast on the continent has apparently taken a very specific, very unusual interest in the fact that Silverfang's clan has resurfaced after 3 generations in hiding, with you as its first bonded human in all that time. I don't know exactly what that interest means yet, but I don't like it, and I don't think you should either. That night, back at Howling Peak, Naruto relayed the warning to Silverfang, watching the ancient wolf's expression grow increasingly grave as he listened. This does not entirely surprise me, Silverfang admitted, once Naruto had finished. There are older enemies in this world than Akatsuki, Silverfang, enemies whose grievances with my clan predate even the wound the toads once dealt us. I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that our long isolation had allowed those old rivalries to fade into irrelevance. What kind of enemies? Naruto pressed, unease deepening. Silverfang was quiet for a long moment, ice-blue eyes distant and troubled. That, he said finally, is a story for another night, Silverfang, once I have gathered more certainty than rumor alone can provide. For now, understand only this. Your path towards sage mastery has drawn attention from corners of this world far older and far more dangerous than a single rogue organization, however fearsome Akatsuki's reputation may be. Train harder. Train faster. I suspect strongly that we no longer have the luxury of unlimited time to prepare you properly. The warning settled heavy in Naruto's chest, an uneasy counterpoint to the steady, hard-won progress he'd made these past months. A reminder that whatever strength he was building, somewhere out there, something was already taking careful, calculated notice of exactly how much that strength had begun to matter. The final months of the training trip brought Naruto's wolf sage training to its most demanding, most dangerous stage yet. Extended pack runs stretched across full days rather than mere hours, sustained natural energy states held for minutes rather than fleeting seconds, each incremental gain purchased through exhaustion and risk that left even Ash Cloud, usually so composed, visibly anxious on more than one occasion. It was during one such extended session, deep into the trip's final weeks, that Naruto finally achieved something Frostmane herself admitted she hadn't fully expected to witness in his lifetime, let alone within a single training period. The pack run had stretched nearly 6 hours, Naruto's stamina pushed to genuine limits that would have broken him completely 8 months earlier, when the familiar golden shimmer finally bloomed fully across his skin, not the fleeting, seconds-long glimpse he'd grown accustomed to, but something sustained, stable, holding steady even as his howl rose alongside the pack's unified chorus. His eyes, when he finally opened them, had taken on a striking amber-gold hue, faint reddish markings tracing across his cheeks in patterns reminiscent of, but distinct from, his natural whisker marks. His movements, when Frostmane called for a brief sparring demonstration, carried a speed and instinctive precision that left even Ash Cloud genuinely struggling to keep pace. "This is it," Frostmane breathed, ancient eyes wide with something Naruto had never seen from her before. Genuine, unguarded astonishment. Incomplete, unstable, unsustainable for more than a handful of minutes at present. But this, Stray, is unmistakably Wolf Sage state. Naruto felt the power thrumming through him, wild and vast and only barely, precariously controlled, and understood, with sudden clarity, exactly why both Frostmane and Jiraiya had warned him so insistently about the dangers of pushing this training too far, too fast. The state held for nearly 4 full minutes before instability crept in, his features beginning to flicker unpredictably, natural energy beginning to gather faster than his still-developing control could safely manage. Silverfang, watching with careful, focused attention, called an immediate halt the moment the first warning signs appeared, guiding Naruto through the careful, deliberate process of releasing the gathered energy before it could destabilize into something genuinely dangerous. Naruto collapsed to his knees the instant the state fully released, shaking with exhaustion but grinning despite it, the golden markings fading slowly from his skin. "I did it," he breathed. "I actually did it." "You achieved a beginning," Silverfang corrected gently, though the pride in his voice was, this time, entirely unguarded. "A true beginning, Emberfang, considerably further than this den ever expected to see a bonded human reach in a single training period. But a beginning nonetheless. True mastery remains a distant horizon still." "I don't care," Naruto said, still catching his breath, still grinning. "I'll get there. Whatever it takes." Frostmane, watching him with something that might, on her weathered ancient features, have been called genuine warmth, inclined her head slowly. "I believe you will, Stray," she said, "though I suspect, given everything Silverfang has shared about the shadow now gathering interest in this den's resurgence, you may find yourself needing to reach that mastery considerably faster than any sage before you has ever been asked to manage." The training trip's final days brought Naruto back toward Konoha with a body and spirit both transformed by everything the past 2.5 years had demanded of him. Jiraiya's toad-based fundamentals fully absorbed and refined, a fragile, unstable, but genuinely achieved Wolf Sage state now within his reach, and a growing, unshakable sense that whatever waited for him back home, he was walking toward it considerably more prepared than the boy who'd left. It was on their very last night on the road, camped beneath open sky with Konoha's familiar silhouette visible in the distance, that Jiraiya finally broached the subject that had clearly been weighing on him for weeks. "I need you to understand something, kid," he said, staring into their small campfire with unusual seriousness. "Everything I've told you about Akatsuki, about the danger gathering around your wolf contract, none of that is going to just disappear the moment we walk back through Konoha's gates. If anything, I suspect it's about to become considerably more immediate." "I know," Naruto said quietly. "I'm ready for it. As ready as I can be, anyway." Jiraiya studied him for a long, searching moment. This boy who'd once been a scrawny, overconfident academy failure, now carrying 2 sage disciplines and a bond with an ancient clan that predated the very village they were about to return to. "Your father would be proud of you, kid," he said finally, quietly. "I hope you know that." Naruto's throat tightened, an unexpected warmth cutting through the day's exhaustion. "Thanks," he said softly. "That actually means a lot." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, the fire crackling softly between them, before Naruto finally slipped away into a brief, exhausted sleep, and it was there, in the quiet dark of that final night on the road, that the wolf-sealed scroll at his side pulsed one final time before their return to the village. He found Silverfang waiting, as always, atop his familiar outcropping, ice-blue eyes carrying a weight considerably heavier than Naruto had grown accustomed to seeing. "You return home tomorrow," Silverfang said. "A stronger Emberfang than the one who left, and I am, without reservation, proud of everything you have achieved these past 2.5 years. But? Naruto prompted, sensing the unspoken weight behind those words. Silverfang was quiet for a long moment, gazing out over the valley with an expression Naruto had rarely seen from him, something that looked, unmistakably, like genuine apprehension. I have spent recent weeks reaching out through channels this den has not used in generations, he said finally, seeking confirmation of the rumors Jiraiya shared regarding this shadow's interest in your training. Tonight, I received an answer I had hoped, desperately, not to receive. What did you find out? Silverfang turned to face him fully, ancient eyes carrying the weight of something old and dangerous finally, fully confirmed. The scout Akatsuki sent to probe Arden's resurgence, he said, was not their true interest at all, Emberfang. It was merely a test, confirmation that the old bloodline of wolf sages had genuinely reawakened after 3 generations of dormancy. The true hunter behind this interest is someone considerably older than Akatsuki itself. Someone whose grievance with this den predates even the wound the toads once dealt us. A rogue summoner who fought on the losing side of the very war that first drove my clan into hiding, and who has spent 3 generations waiting, patiently, for exactly this moment to resurface. Naruto's blood ran cold, the golden triumph of Wolf Sage State's first successful attempt suddenly feeling considerably more fragile against the weight of this new revelation. Is that bad? He asked, echoing, once again, the same worn, familiar question that had carried him through every escalating danger this entire journey had thrown at him. Silverfang's ancient eyes held his steadily, grave and unflinching. That, he said quietly, depends entirely on how quickly you can master what you have only just begun to touch tonight, Emberfang. Because I do not believe this hunter intends to wait much longer before making their true intentions known. Somewhere far below, across the valley's frozen peaks, a low, distant howl rose up unbidden, not in celebration this time, but in something considerably more like warning, carried on a wind that suddenly felt colder than the training trip's brutal months ever had. Naruto's trainings paid off, 2.5 years, 2 sage disciplines, and a fragile grip on power this den hasn't seen in 3 generations. But that old rift between wolves and toads was never the whole story, was it? Somewhere out there, an enemy older than Akatsuki has been waiting 3 generations for exactly this moment. Konoha's gates looked exactly the same as Naruto remembered, and everything behind them felt completely different. Sakura was the first to spot him, and the shriek of delighted disbelief she let out drew half the surrounding street's attention before she'd even fully closed the distance between them. She'd grown taller, sharper-eyed, her Chunin vest fitting with the easy confidence of someone who'd earned every inch of authority it represented. You're taller, she said, staring up at him with open astonishment once the initial hug had ended. And wait, is that a new headband style? Naruto, what happened to you out there? Long story, Naruto said, grinning despite the exhaustion of the road still clinging to him. Really long story? Where's Sasuke? Training ground 7, Sakura said. He's been waiting for you to come back for weeks. Kakashi-sensei let something slip about your timeline, and he's been insufferable about it ever since. Naruto found Sasuke exactly where Sakura promised, mid-spar against a training dummy that had clearly seen better days. And the reunion that followed carried none of the easy warmth of Sakura's greeting, just a long, appraising look between 2 former rivals, followed by the faintest, most reluctant twitch of a smile from Sasuke's usually guarded expression. You look stronger, Sasuke said, which, from him, counted as practically a parade. You too, Naruto said. Been keeping busy? Someone had to hold this village together while you were off doing whatever it is you actually do on these training trips, Sasuke said, though there was no real bite in it. Kakashi's been cagey about the details. Said it wasn't his story to tell. Naruto hesitated, weighing for a fraction of a second how much to share, before deciding, as he usually did these days, that his team deserved honesty over caution. Come on, he said. Let's find Kakashi-sensei too. I think it's about time I actually explained all of it properly. All 3 of you deserve to hear the whole thing, not just pieces. The explanation took the better part of an afternoon, delivered in Kakashi's small apartment over tea steeped from local herbs. Naruto walking his team through everything from that first moonlit clearing 2.5 years ago to Silverfang's grim, hard-won confirmation on the road home. Sakura listened with wide-eyed fascination, occasionally interrupting with rapid-fire questions about pack hierarchy and sensory training that betrayed her scholar's curiosity even now. Sasuke listened in his usual guarded silence, though the tightening of his jaw when Naruto described the rogue summoner hunting him spoke volumes about how seriously he was taking the threat. Kakashi, who'd already known the broad strokes since that quiet campfire conversation on the road to Wave, mostly listened for the new details. The training trip, the wolf sage breakthrough, the warning about a hunter older than Akatsuki itself. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, Kakashi said once Naruto had finally finished, setting down his tea with careful, deliberate precision. You're now carrying two distinct sage disciplines, an ancient wolf clan's trust and protection, and the attention of an enemy that predates Akatsuki's entire hunting campaign, on top of already being their primary target as Kurama's Jinchuriki. When you put it like that, Naruto said, it sounds like a lot. It is a lot, Sakura said, exasperated affection warring with genuine worry in her voice. Naruto, this is way beyond anything a genin, even a genin who's clearly not really a genin's worth of strength anymore, should be dealing with alone. I'm not alone, Naruto said, quiet but firm. I've got the pack. I've got Jiraiya. And I've got you guys if you're willing to actually help instead of just worrying about me from the sidelines. Something shifted in Sasuke's expression at that. A flicker of old, familiar guilt, quickly buried beneath his usual composure. We're in, he said simply, before Sakura could even formulate her own response. Whatever's coming, you're not facing it without backup. Not again. The weight behind that not again hung heavy in the small apartment, an unspoken acknowledgement of the valley of the end, of everything that confrontation had nearly cost all of them, and Naruto felt something warm and grateful settle into his chest at the easy, unconditional way his team had simply, immediately closed ranks around him. This is Pack 2, he realized, turning the thought over with quiet wonder. It always was. I just didn't have the word for it before. The peace of that reunion didn't last long. Nothing in this story ever does it? It was less than a week later, during a routine border patrol assignment that should have been little more than a formality, that the first real sign of the coming storm made itself known. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura had been dispatched alongside a small Chunin escort to investigate reports of unusual chakra disturbances near Konoha's eastern border. Nothing officially urgent, more a precaution than anything, given the village's still cautious posture in the aftermath of the invasion. But the moment they arrived at the reported coordinates, Naruto's senses, sharper now than they'd ever been, honed by 2.5 years of relentless training, caught something that sent every instinct in his body onto high alert. Someone's here, he said quietly, freezing mid-stride. And it's not sound or sand. This is something else entirely. Sasuke's Sharingan flared instantly, scanning the surrounding forest with focused intensity. I don't see anyone. Doesn't mean they're not there, Naruto said, closing his eyes, letting his senses stretch outward the way Ash Cloud had spent years teaching him to trust. The scent, when he finally isolated it from the forest's usual layers of pine and earth, made his stomach drop with sudden, chilling recognition, cold, ancient, and threaded through with something that felt disturbingly similar to the frost-touched chakra of the wolf den itself, twisted and soured into something wrong. That's not Akatsuki, he breathed. That smells like us. Like the den. But rotten. Corrupted somehow. Before anyone could fully process that unsettling revelation, a figure dropped from the tree canopy above with fluid, predatory grace, cloaked in dark, tattered fabric, features obscured beneath a hood, but unmistakably radiating the same twisted, frost-touched chakra Naruto had just identified. Uzumaki Naruto, the figure said, voice raspy and cold, carrying an accent Naruto couldn't quite place. Bonded to Silverfang's resurrected pack. I've been sent to confirm exactly how far your training has progressed. Who are you? Naruto demanded, already shifting into a defensive stance, Sasuke and Sakura flanking him with matching alertness. A scout, the figure said simply. Nothing more. My master does not yet consider you worth his own direct attention, merely worth confirming as a genuine threat before he commits further resources. The hood shifted slightly, revealing just enough of the figure's face to show cold, calculating eyes studying Naruto with clinical, unsettling interest. Tell me, boy, has the old wolf taught you sage state yet? Or does that fragile golden shimmer I sense beneath your skin remain as unstable as I suspect? Naruto's blood ran cold. This scout could sense his sage training, could gauge, apparently, exactly how far along that dangerous, unstable path he'd progressed. That's none of your business, he said, forcing steel into his voice despite the unease coiling in his chest. On the contrary, the figure said, it is precisely my business. My master has waited 3 generations for Silverfang's bloodline to reawaken its sage tradition. He does not intend to let this opportunity pass without proper assessment. Sasuke moved first, closing the distance with sudden, explosive speed, Chidori already crackling to life in his palm. But the scout dodged with unsettling ease, twisting aside at the last possible moment with a fluidity that spoke of genuine, considerable skill. Impressive reflexes, the figure observed, almost conversationally. But I'm not here to fight your team today, Uchiha. Merely to observe. Their attention returned to Naruto, cold and assessing. I've seen enough. Your sage state is real, if still dangerously unstable. That is all my master required confirmed. Wait. Naruto lunged forward, desperate to press for more information, but the scout was already retreating, moving with a speed that made pursuit genuinely difficult even for someone of Naruto's considerably enhanced abilities. Tell Silverfang, the figure called back, already melting into the tree line, that the debt from that old war has come due at last. He will understand exactly what that means. And then, in a blur of dark fabric and twisted, frost-touched chakra, they were gone entirely, leaving Naruto standing frozen in the forest clearing, Sasuke and Sakura converging on him with matching expressions of grim, urgent concern. We need to report this, Sasuke said immediately. Tsunade-sama needs to know about this immediately. And you need to talk to Silverfang, Sakura added. Whatever that scout meant about an old debt coming due, he clearly knows something we don't. Naruto nodded, unease settling deep and cold into his chest, the golden triumph of his training trip's final breakthrough suddenly feeling considerably more precarious against the weight of this new, immediate threat. The report to Tsunade went about as gravely as Naruto expected, the newly installed Hokage listening with sharp, focused attention as he relayed every detail of the encounter, her expression growing increasingly troubled as the implications settled fully into place. An enemy older than Akatsuki, specifically targeting a resurrected sage bloodline, she said finally, rubbing her temples with visible frustration, as if this village didn't already have enough threats to track. Naruto, I need you to be completely honest with me. How dangerous is this scout's master likely to be? I don't know for sure, Naruto admitted. But Silverfang's scared of him. And Silverfang doesn't scare easy. Tsunade's expression darkened further at that. Then we treat this as a serious, active threat until we have reason to believe otherwise. I'm assigning additional security around your usual routes, and I want you coordinating closely with Jiraiya on this. He's got more history with these old summoning conflicts than anyone else currently in the village. There's something else, Naruto added, hesitant but resolved. I need to go back to the den. Tonight if I can manage it. Silverfang needs to know exactly what that scout said, and I think he's got answers he's been holding back. Tsunade studied him for a long moment, weighing the request against the obvious danger of the situation, before finally nodding. Go. But take precautions, and report back the moment you have real information. This isn't a threat we can afford to underestimate. He found Silverfang waiting atop the familiar outcropping that evening, the ancient wolf's posture radiating attention Naruto had rarely seen from him. Not fear, exactly, but something adjacent to it, old and weary and finally, unmistakably resigned. You encountered his scout, Silverfang said before Naruto had even finished climbing the last stretch of trail. I felt the disturbance the moment it happened, though I confess I had hoped, foolishly, that we still had more time before this confrontation became unavoidable. He said something about a debt from an old war coming due, Naruto said, settling into the snow across from him. You know exactly who he's talking about, don't you? Silverfang was quiet for a long moment, ice blue eyes distant, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight considerably heavier than even his account of the Toad betrayal had carried. His name, the name he bore in life, at least, before circumstances twisted him into something considerably darker, was Grim Jaw, Silverfang said. He was, once, a member of my own den, a rival for leadership, in the years before the war that shattered our clan's peace with the Toads. He was one of yours? He was, Silverfang confirmed grimly. And when I broke our contract with the Toad clan following that devastating betrayal, Grimjaw disagreed violently with my decision. He believed retreat and isolation represented weakness, that our clan should instead seek vengeance against the Toads directly, regardless of the cost such a war would exact from our already diminished numbers. What happened? I refused, Silverfang said simply. As den leader, the decision was mine to make, and I judged further conflict a path that would only compound our losses rather than heal them. Grimjaw could not accept that judgment. He gathered a small faction of wolves who shared his fury, and he left this den entirely, seeking power through means our clan had always considered forbidden, binding himself not just to a human summoner, but to a corrupted, unnatural ritual that fused wolf and human chakra in ways never meant to be sustained. Naruto's stomach twisted with growing dread. What did that do to him? It transformed him, Silverfang said, into something no longer fully wolf, no longer fully anything this den recognizes as kin. A twisted amalgamation, sustained through corrupted natural energy and a hunger for power that has, apparently, only grown more consuming across 3 generations of exile. His ice-blue eyes met Naruto's directly. He has waited, Emberfang, for exactly this moment, for our clan's sage tradition to reawaken, for a bonded human to walk the path he himself once coveted and was denied. I suspect he intends to either claim that power for himself, or destroy it entirely, rather than watch this den succeed at something he was cast out for failing to achieve through his own corrupted methods. The weight of that revelation settled heavy and cold in Naruto's chest, an enemy born not from some distant, abstract rivalry, but from the very same den that had raised and trained him, twisted by grief and fury into something monstrous. Can he be stopped? Naruto asked quietly. I do not know, Silverfang admitted, and the honesty of that uncertainty was, somehow, more unsettling than any confident warning could have been. 3 generations of corrupted power is not a small thing to face, Emberfang, however far your own training has progressed. But I know this, whatever confrontation is coming, this den will stand beside you fully when it arrives. Grimjaw abandoned this pack once already. We will not abandon you in turn. The days that followed brought a tense, watchful quiet to Konoha, Jiraiya returning to the village upon urgent summons from Tsunade, his own network of contacts scrambling to gather whatever additional intelligence existed on Grimjaw's movements and capabilities. I've heard whispers of this before, Jiraiya admitted, gathered with Naruto, Tsunade, and Kakashi around a war table in the Hokage's office, old maps and scattered reports spread across its surface. Old rumors, decades back, about a corrupted summoner operating on the fringes of several minor conflicts, never confirmed, never fully investigated, because frankly nobody realized the scale of what they were dealing with until now. Do we know where he's operating from? Tsunade asked. Not precisely, Jiraiya said. But if Silverfang's account is accurate, and I've got no reason to doubt an ancient wolf who's clearly spent 3 generations dreading exactly this confrontation, I'd guess he's been building strength somewhere isolated. Somewhere he could sustain that corrupted transformation without drawing attention from villages or other summoning clans. That doesn't exactly narrow things down, Kakashi observed dryly. No, Jiraiya agreed. Which means our best option right now isn't hunting him down proactively. It's making sure Naruto's prepared for whatever confrontation Grimjaw ultimately chooses to force. All eyes turned to Naruto, who felt the weight of that expectation settle heavy across his shoulders. My sage state's still unstable, he admitted honestly. I can hold it for a few minutes at most before it starts destabilizing. If Grimjaw's genuinely as strong as Silverfang seems to think, that's not gonna be enough. Then we get you stronger, Jiraiya said simply. Fast as we safely can anyway. I'll work with you on stabilizing your toad-based reserves further. Whatever additional training the Wolf Den can offer, take it. We're not sending you into this confrontation unprepared, kid, not after everything this village has already lost to threats we underestimated. The reference to the 3rd Hokage's death hung unspoken but heavy in the room, and Naruto nodded, resolve hardening beneath the very real fear coiled in his chest. Whatever it takes, he said. I'm not gonna let this village, or the den, Pay for a fight that isn't even really theirs to begin with. The following weeks brought an intensity to Naruto's training that even the grueling months at Howling Peak hadn't fully prepared him for. Jiraiya pushing his natural energy sensing and control with renewed, focused urgency, while nights at the Wolf Den saw Frostmane and Ash Cloud driving him through increasingly demanding sage state exercises, testing the limits of his stability with a rigor that left him perpetually exhausted but undeniably, incrementally stronger. It was during one of these sessions, roughly 3 weeks into this intensified training, that the confrontation Silverfang had so grimly anticipated finally, unavoidably arrived. Naruto was deep into an extended pack run at Howling Peak, sage state held steady for nearly 6 full minutes, a personal record, hard-won and precarious, when the entire pack around him froze in unison, hackles raised, every wolf present oriented toward the same distant point at the valley's edge. "He's here," Frostmane said, voice tight with old, unmistakable dread. Grimjaw. "I can feel his corrupted chakra even from this distance." Naruto's sage state flickered, destabilizing slightly under the sudden surge of adrenaline, and he forced himself to breathe, to steady, to hold on to the fragile golden shimmer even as every instinct screamed at him to abandon careful control in favor of immediate, desperate readiness. Silverfang appeared moments later, descending from his usual perch with a speed and urgency Naruto had never once witnessed from the normally composed ancient wolf. "He has crossed into our territory directly," Silverfang said grimly. "Which means, Emberfang, that whatever confrontation he intends, he no longer sees value in further delay." They found him at the valley's outer edge, a figure that made Naruto's stomach twist with genuine, visceral horror the moment he came into view. Grimjaw stood roughly the size of Silverfang himself, but where Silverfang's form carried the clean, powerful grace of a true wolf, Grimjaw's twisted silhouette bore the unmistakable marks of corruption, patches of matted, discolored fur giving way to exposed, sickly gray flesh, elongated limbs that bent at angles no natural wolf's anatomy should allow, and eyes that burned an unnatural, sickly green rather than any color found in nature. "Silverfang," Grimjaw rasped, voice a grating, layered distortion that made Naruto's skin crawl. 3 generations, old friend. 3 generations of hiding in this frozen tomb of a den, and you finally found a vessel worth reawakening our clan's true potential. Grimjaw, Silverfang said, voice hard and cold. "You have no place in this territory any longer. Leave, and perhaps this confrontation need not end in further bloodshed." "Leave?" Grimjaw's twisted form let out a grating, humorless laugh. "I have waited 3 generations for exactly this moment, Silverfang. I did not claw my way through corrupted rituals and forbidden power merely to walk away the instant our paths finally cross again." His burning green eyes shifted toward Naruto, studying him with the same cold, clinical assessment his scout had displayed weeks earlier, but magnified now into something considerably more hungry, more possessive. "So this is the vessel," he said. "Human, bonded barely 2.5 years, carrying a sage state so unstable I can sense it flickering even now." He tilted his elongated head, something almost pitying in his twisted expression. "Silverfang, you truly are as reckless as ever, entrusting our clan's entire sage legacy to a boy who cannot even sustain the transformation past a handful of minutes." "He has achieved in 2.5 years, Silverfang said, cold fury threading through his measured voice, "what you never once accomplished in the decades you spent pursuing power through corruption instead of patience. That should tell you everything you need to know about which path was truly worth walking." Grimjaw's expression twisted with sudden, violent fury. "Patience did not save my pack when I demanded justice against the toads. Patience did not restore what we lost that day. You chose isolation and cowardice, Silverfang, and called it wisdom. I chose power, whatever the cost, and I intend to claim what should have been mine from the very beginning." He lunged. The battle that erupted across Howling Peak's exposed summit was, without exaggeration, the most terrifying confrontation Naruto had faced in his entire shinobi career. Grimjaw's corrupted strength overwhelming, his twisted form moving with an unnatural, jarring speed that made every one of Naruto's honed instincts scream in protest. Silverfang met the initial assault head-on, ancient power and decades of leadership experience clashing violently against Grimjaw's corrupted, desperate fury. The two former pack mates tearing across the snow-covered summit in a battle that shook the very mountain beneath them. Emberfang. Ashcloud's voice cut through the chaos, urgent and sharp. Your sage state. Hold it. We need every advantage we can get. Naruto forced himself back into that fragile, golden-tinged state, chakra thrumming wild and vast through his system, and threw himself into the fight alongside Silverfang, Frostpaw and the rest of the strike pack converging in coordinated, desperate support. It still wasn't enough. Grimjaw's corrupted power, built across 3 generations of forbidden ritual and consuming hunger, proved genuinely, terrifyingly overwhelming, batting aside Naruto's Fang Style strikes with contemptuous ease, shrugging off Rasengan impacts that would have devastated any ordinary opponent, his twisted form seemingly capable of absorbing damage that should have ended the fight several times over. You're strong, Grimjaw admitted, almost conversationally, even as he drove Naruto back with a brutal, sweeping strike that sent him tumbling across the snow. Stronger than I expected for someone bonded so briefly. But strength built on patience and restraint will always fall short against power seized without hesitation. Naruto dragged himself upright, breathing hard, sage state flickering dangerously at the edges of his control, and felt something cold and desperate settle into his chest, the growing, sickening realization that this fight, as it currently stood, was one they were genuinely, catastrophically losing. Pack doesn't leave anyone behind, Silverfang's voice echoed, unbidden, through the chaos. But what happens when the pack isn't strong enough to save itself? It was in that moment of desperate uncertainty, watching Silverfang stagger under another brutal exchange, watching Ash Cloud and Frostpaw and the entire strike pack fighting with everything they had and still, visibly, losing ground, that something shifted in Naruto's chest, a fierce, desperate resolve crystallizing beneath the fear. Not this time. I'm not losing this pack. Not like Silverfang lost his the first time. He closed his eyes, reaching not just for the fragile wolf sage state he'd spent months carefully cultivating, but for everything else this journey had given him. Jiraiya's careful, patient teaching, the felt, intuitive chakra control that had carried him through 2.5 years of relentless training, the desperate, protective fury that had once redirected a killing blow at the Valley of the End. The golden shimmer around him surged, unstable and dangerous, threatening to overwhelm his control entirely. And for one terrifying, electric moment, Naruto genuinely didn't know whether he was about to achieve a breakthrough or lose himself entirely to the wild, consuming power now thrumming through every cell of his body. Grimjaw, sensing the shift, turned his burning green eyes fully onto Naruto, something between hunger and genuine alarm crossing his twisted features. What is this? He rasped. This is not the fragile, unstable state my scout reported. What have you? He didn't get to finish the question. Naruto surged forward with speed that even he hadn't fully anticipated, sage-enhanced Fang Style tearing through Grimjaw's defenses with a precision and power that finally, genuinely staggered the corrupted wolf backward, driving him toward the summit's exposed cliff edge. But even as that desperate surge bought them crucial ground, Naruto could feel the state's instability accelerating dangerously, his own control fraying at the edges under the strain of power his body had never been trained to sustain at this intensity. Emberfang, stop! Silverfang's urgent warning cut through the chaos. You cannot sustain this. The strain will. The warning came too late. Naruto's vision flickered, his body seizing with sudden, overwhelming instability, the golden shimmer around him surging violently out of control, and as darkness began creeping in at the edges of his awareness, the last thing he registered was Grimjaw's twisted, triumphant expression, and Silverfang's desperate, furious roar cutting across the mountain summit. This isn't how it's supposed to end, Naruto thought, distant and fading. I promised I wouldn't leave anyone behind.